and welcome to the only table where the screams are the appetizers, and the fear is the main course. Pull up a chair, if you dare. Tonight, the shadows are stretching long, the floorboards are creaking with unseen footsteps, and the air is thick with a whisper you can't quite place. You're listening to the Scare Table, where we serve up the deepest, darkest, and most delightful chills the world has to offer. We have set a place just for you. Get ready to feast on true tales of terror, unsettling legends, and the bizarre happenings that defy explanation. Turn down the lights, lock the doors, and maybe check what's standing behind you. It's time to gather round the Scare Table. Let the haunting begin.
The table is reset. The tools are laid out. Tonight, we begin the forensic audit of the Halloween franchise. This isn't just a series of movies. It's an architectural labyrinth. We are dealing with multiple timelines, retcons, and diverging paths that make most horror franchises look like a straight line. But every labyrinth has a center, and for us, that is the 1978 foundation laid by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill.
Viscerally, we're stepping away from the whodunit and into the what is it. Michael Myers, The Shape, is a masterclass in technical simplicity. He is a predator that doesn't need a voice or a complex plan. He just needs a kitchen knife and a target. We're going to audit how a low-budget independent film created the most enduring, visceral image in the history of the genre.
And psychologically, we're looking at the birth of the final girl blueprint. Laurie Strode is our case study in high-level awareness. While her peers were distracted by the architecture of a typical teenage night, she was the only one tracking the logic leaks in the shadows of Haddonfield. Tonight, we go back to the night he came home.
John Carpenter didn't just film a neighborhood. He turned the safe streets of Haddonfield into a functional trap. The roaming, wide-angle shots make the audience feel like they are floating, much like The Shape himself. The house on Lambkin Lane isn't just wood and glass. It's a monument to a technical failure of safety. The mask is a blank slate. Because it has no expression, it acts as a mirror for the audience's fear. It is a hollow design that allows the legend to grow.
The 1978 film is about mechanical persistence. Michael doesn't run, he doesn't shout. He just moves with a technical inevitability. When Michael pins Bob to the wall, that head tilt is the most important visceral moment in the film. It's the curiosity of a predator observing a specimen. It shows us that Michael isn't just a killer, he's an observer. He uses the environment. He isn't a ghost, but he understands the blind spots of suburban architecture, bushes, clotheslines, and dark hallways.
What makes this original blueprint so sturdy is the absence of reason. The void. In 1978, Michael has no motive. He isn't a brother or a cult member. He is simply the shape. Psychologically, a killer without a why is infinitely more terrifying because there is no logic leak to exploit. You can't bargain with a void. The vigilant survivor. Laurie Strode survives because she trusts her eyes over her comfort. Her psychological resilience is built on her ability to see the boogeyman when everyone else calls him a prank.
It is the perfect foundation. But as we know, the following decades saw some questionable renovations. We've got secret bloodlines, druidic cults, and entire timelines that vanish into thin air.
The visceral ledger for 78 is surgical. The sequels? That's where the blood starts to spill out of the blueprints.
And we're going to audit every single version of this story until we find the truth.
All right, let's get the boots on the ground. When we talk about the visceral impact of 1978, we have to talk about the physicality of silence. Michael Myers in this original blueprint isn't a lumbering zombie. He's agile, he's calculated, and he's hauntingly still. Take the technical execution of the Judith Myers opening. That 4-minute unbroken POV shot is a masterpiece of visceral immersion. You aren't just watching a kill, The architecture of the cinematography forces you to be the 6-year-old holding the knife. When that mask comes off and you see the kid, the logic leak is immediate. It's the realization that the monster didn't come from a dark forest. It was born in a middle-class bedroom.
Exactly, Marcus. And from an architectural standpoint, Carpenter uses the negative space of suburbia. Think about the wide shots of the Wallace and Doyle houses across the street from each other. He uses the depth of field to keep the audience's eyes scanning the background. Most horror movies try to jump scare you by popping something into the frame. Halloween does the opposite. It puts Michael in the frame, standing perfectly still under a clothesline or behind a hedge, and just lets him exist there. It turns the entire neighborhood into a panopticon. The safety of the picket fence is revealed to be a technical illusion because the fence doesn't keep him out. It just gives him a place to hide.
And that's where the psychological pressure builds. The genius of the 1978 script is the isolation of the babysitter. Psychologically, Annie, Linda, and Laurie are in a transitional space. They are responsible for children, but they are still children themselves. Michael targets them during this in-between time. He exploits the technical vulnerability of their situation. They are alone in houses that aren't theirs, during a holiday where pranks provide the perfect cover for a predator. Laurie is the only one who doesn't dismiss the creepy feeling. While Annie is literally stuck in a laundry room window, a physical metaphor for her being trapped by her own lack of awareness, Laurie is building a psychological fortress. She's the only one who treats the boogeyman as a credible threat.
But let's talk about the surgical persistence of the finale. When Michael comes through that closet door, it's not a frenzied attack. It's a technical breach. He breaks through the louvered doors with a mechanical strength that defies his human frame. And then, the grand finale in the hallway. 6 shots from Loomis. Michael falls off the balcony. From a visceral perspective, that should be the end of the ledger. But when Loomis looks over that railing and the body is gone, that is the moment the architecture shifts from slasher to cosmic horror. The technical failure of the 6 shots proves that Michael isn't a man, he's an idea.
It's the ultimate cliffhanger. If the body is gone, then the shape is everywhere. He's in every dark hallway and behind every bush in Haddonfield. It's a terrifyingly open-ended blueprint.
It's the psychological realization that you can't kill what you can't define. He isn't Michael anymore, he's just the shape.
The audit of the 1978 foundation is clear. It's a perfectly built house of cards that refuses to fall. But as we transition into the 1981 expansion, the builders started adding some very specific bloodline reinforcements. All right, let's pull back the tarp and look at the actual construction of this thing. When you audit the 1978 original, you aren't just looking at a scary movie. You're looking at a masterpiece of economic architecture. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill had a budget of roughly $300,000. In the world of structural engineering, that's basically working with toothpicks and glue. But because they couldn't afford explosions or elaborate sets, they had to rely on technical precision. The most significant architectural choice was the use of Panavision 35mm anamorphic lenses. Most low-budget horror films of that era were shot on 16mm, grainy, tight, and cheap-looking. By going widescreen, Carpenter gave Haddonfield a sense of grand scale. He used the Panaglide, a predecessor to the Steadicam. This was a massive technical leap. By having the camera float through the house, like in that opening 4-minute POV shot, the architecture of the Doyle house becomes a fluid, living trap. You aren't just looking at a room, you're moving through the negative space where the shape lives. Behind the scenes, this was a sweat equity build. The production was so tight that the crew was literally doing everything. The foliage logic. They filmed in Southern California in the spring, but the movie is set in Illinois in October. To fix that logic leak, the crew had to hand paint bags of dried leaves brown and scatter them around the sets. Then, after the take, they'd rake them up and move them to the next house. Whew, talk about a technical workaround. The mask construction. We all know the legend, but from a design standpoint, it's brilliant. They took a Dawn Post Captain Kirk mask, widened the eye holes, and spray painted it fish tank white. By removing the human features of William Shatner, they created a technical void. It's the most cost-effective architectural icon in history. Carpenter's cinematographer, Dean Cundey, used a technique called chiaroscuro, high-contrast lighting. In the audit, this is what we call lighting as architecture. Cundey would light the sets so that the edges of the rooms vanished into pure black. This allowed Michael to literally materialize out of the walls. It's not just a dark room, it's a room where the shadows have been technically designed to hide a 200-pound predator. They used blue gels on the lights to give the night a cold, surgical feel that made the warm interiors of the houses feel like fragile islands of safety. Behind the scenes, it was a crew of friends working for pennies, but the architectural integrity they built was so strong that we're still sitting at this table discussing it 50 years later. They didn't have the money for a palace, so they built a perfectly designed kill box instead.
And that kill box has a 100% efficiency rating. All right, let's talk about the visceral ledger of 1978. If you're coming into this audit expecting the splatter architecture of the later sequels, you're going to be surprised. This original blueprint isn't built on blood. It's built on suspense and spatial awareness. Carpenter didn't use a sledgehammer to get a reaction. He used a tuning fork. He wanted to vibrate your nerves until they snapped. From a technical standpoint, the 1978 original is incredibly dry. There's almost no gore on screen. But here's why it works. The mind's eye logic leak. When Michael kills Annie in the car, you don't see the blade enter the throat. You see the fogged-up glass, the struggle, and the sudden, violent silence. When Linda is strangled with the telephone cord, the horror isn't in the bruising, it's in the audio architecture. That heavy, rhythmic breathing on the other end of the line, while Laurie listens in, is a visceral assault that stays with you longer than a bucket of red corn syrup ever could. The scares in this film rely on peripheral dread. Most modern horror movies use the jump scare blueprint. Silence, silence, then a loud bang and a face in the camera. Carpenter does something much meaner. He puts Michael in the frame, but he doesn't tell you he's there. You'll be watching Laurie talk to her friends, and your eyes will naturally drift to a laundry line in the background or a shadow in a doorway. When you finally spot the white mask just standing there watching, that's a high technicality scare. It's rewarding the audience for being observant and then punishing them for it by making them realize they're the only ones who see the predator. When we get to the finale in the Doyle house, the scares shift from atmospheric to mechanical. This is the most claustrophobic piece of architecture in the film. Laurie is trapped in a space that is literally designed for storage, not survival. Michael's arm breaking through the louvered doors is a visceral breach. It's the sound of the sanctuary splintering. The biggest scare in the whole audit happens after Loomis shoots Michael. Michael falls. We see him on the grass. We see Loomis look down. Then we get that wide shot of the empty lawn. The visceral impact is the sudden absence. The boogeyman isn't a body anymore. He's a location. He's the wind, the shadows, and the sound of your own breathing. So while the gore hounds might find the ledger a bit thin on the '78 film, the scare integrity is off the charts. It's a masterclass in how to make the audience's imagination do the heavy lifting. He didn't show you the monster's guts. He showed you that the monster could be standing right behind you while you watch the movie.
It's a less is more structural philosophy.
And psychologically, that's why it's so much harder to shake. You can't unsee a shadow. Now, for the one thing I loved about the scares, it's the stare. That moment Michael kills Bob and then just tilts his head. That's a visceral technicality that defines the character. It's not rage, it's a dark, silent curiosity.
The audit is holding steady. Chloe, you ready to take the lead on the psychological profile before we close the 78 files?
All right, let's get into the clinical architecture of a nightmare. Psychologically, Michael Myers is the ultimate Rorschach test. In this 1978 blueprint, he isn't a man with a motive. He is a void that the town of Haddonfield and the audience projects their fears into. When I audit the shape from a psychological standpoint, I'm looking at 3 distinct pillars that make him the perfect predator. Most killers have a logic leak, a childhood trauma, a revenge plot, a specific type. But the 1978 Michael Myers has no internal map. He's been staring at a wall for 15 years, and when he escapes, he doesn't go on a mission, he goes home. Psychologically, this is terrifying because you cannot bargain with, empathize with, or predict a void. Dr. Loomis is our psychological proxy here. He spent 8 years trying to reach Michael before realizing that behind those eyes was purely and simply evil. By stripping Michael of a human motive, the architects of the film turned him into a psychological inevitability. He doesn't want your money or your respect. He just wants to observe your transition from life to death. We have to talk about Michael's primary psychological drive: observation. Before he ever touches a knife in Haddonfield, he spends the entire day watching. He watches Laurie at school. He watches her walk home. He watches Annie in the laundry room. This is predatory voyeurism. He is auditing his victims' lives, finding the structural weaknesses in their routines. Psychologically, this creates a sense of total exposure. The fear isn't just that he'll kill you. It's the realization that he's been living with you all day without your knowledge. He has already invaded your psychological sanctuary before he ever breaks a window. Finally, let's look at the mask itself. From a psychological perspective, the mask is a depersonalization tool. It removes the human blueprint from the killer. When Laurie pulls that mask off for a split second in the finale, we see a young man who looks almost blank. By wearing that fish tank white face, Michael becomes a screen. We don't see his anger, we see our own terror reflected back. He doesn't speak, he doesn't scream, and he doesn't show pain. This technical silence forces the victim's brain into a state of hypervigilance. You are constantly trying to read a face that has no data points. It's a psychological short circuit that leads to total panic. So, my final psychological profile for the 1978 Shape? He is a static entity. He doesn't evolve, he doesn't change, and he doesn't feel. He is a glitch in the suburban dream, a reminder that sometimes the boogeyman isn't a metaphor. Sometimes he's just the man standing in the shadows behind your clothesline.
It's a chilling audit, Chloe. He's the only killer who's scarier when he's just standing still.
And that silence is the loudest thing in the room.
So, to wrap my section on the 78 blueprint, I love the psychological purity of Michael as a void. But if I could change one thing, I'd actually remove the Judith Myers backstory entirely. Imagine if we didn't know he was a kid from that house. Imagine if he was just a shape that appeared one night and never left. That's a psychological haunt that never sleeps. So boys, let's put the original on the chopping block. What is the one thing you absolutely loved about the 78 film? And what is the one logic leak or structural choice you would change or fix?
For the architect, the thing I love is the technical geometry of the cinematography. Carpenter uses the 2.35:1 anamorphic widescreen better than anyone in history. He doesn't just fill the frame, he uses the corners. Whether it's Michael's shoulder just barely visible in the edge of the frame while Laurie is talking to Annie, or the way the shape occupies the background of a sunny suburban street, it makes the entire world feel like it's closing in. It's a masterclass in how to build tension using nothing but space. What would I change? This is going to sound like a minor blueprint tweak, but I would fix the Michael can drive logic leak. We get a brief explanation that he maybe watched the guards at the sanitarium, but for a guy who has been staring at a wall since he was 6, he handles a 1977 Ford LTD like a professional getaway driver. I'd have given us one tiny technical beat, maybe a flashback to him watching a driver's ed film in the asylum, just to shore up that one structural crack.
Viscerally, the thing I love is the final standoff in the bedroom. Most slashers today have the killer and the survivor throwing each other through walls like superheroes. But in 78, it's raw. It's awkward. When Michael is trying to get to Laurie in that tiny closet and she's stabbing him with a knitting needle, it feels desperate and real. The technicality of that close quarters combat is what makes it so terrifying. The one thing I'd change? I'd remove the crying Michael. There's a brief moment when Laurie pulls the mask off during the struggle, and Michael looks almost distressed or vulnerable. For my visceral ledger, the shape works best when he is in absolute void. I would have kept the face in total shadow or kept the mask on. I don't want to see a human being under there. I want to believe the mask is the face.
My love is the psychological intuition of the score. That 5/4 time signature in the main theme isn't just a catchy tune, it's an auditory glitch that keeps the listener off balance. It perfectly mirrors Laurie's feeling that something is off in Haddonfield. It's the most effective psychological tool in the entire franchise architecture. As for the change, I would flesh out the Annie and Linda dynamic just a bit more. They are great blueprints for the typical victims, but sometimes they feel like they only exist to show us where Michael is. I'd have loved one more scene that established their friendship with Laurie on a deeper level, making their loss a bigger logic leak for her psychological state in the finale. It would have made her isolation feel even more profound.
There it is. Even a masterpiece has a few loose floorboards.
But the house is still standing. And now it's time to move across the street to the hospital.
Kids all cheer, the leaves fall red and brown, but every shadow holds a fear across this sleepy town. He was just a whisper then, a name they used to dread. Now he's out again and I know he's coming for my head. He's coming for my head. He's a shame, he's a demon in disguise, with dead black eyes that pierce through all my lies. I can run, I can hide, but he's always on my trail. The terror deep inside, a horror that will never fail. He's the boogeyman, he wants to watch me fall. But I won't break, I won't bend, I will answer the call. My friends all laughed, they said I'm mad, just stories from the past. But I felt the evil cold and bad, a shadow moving fast. I locked the doors, I drew the blinds, I clutched that kitchen knife, trying to outrun the kind of evil that devours a life. Coming for my head. He's the shame, he's a demon in disguise, with dead black eyes that pierce through all my lies. I can run, I can hide, but he's always on my trail. The terror deep inside, a horror that will never fail. He's a boogeyman, he wants to watch me fall. But I won't break, I won't bend, I will answer the call. He thought I was just easy prey, a lamb for him to slay. But I learned to fight, I learned to pray, and I'll make him pay today. He pushed me down, he cut my arm, he thought he had me beat. But I'm more than just a girl, more than just a trap. He's a shame,
All right, the table is cleared and the mics are hot. We are picking up the ledger exactly where we left it, the very same night, October 31st, 1978. Welcome to our forensic audit of Halloween 2, 1981. Architecturally, this is a fascinating project. It's what we call a structural extension. Rick Rosenthal took the director's chair, but John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were still holding the blueprints as writers and producers. The film tries to pull off a massive technical feat, starting the clock seconds after the first movie ended and turning Haddonfield Memorial Hospital into a literal fortress turned slaughterhouse.
Viscerally, the ledger undergoes a massive redesign here. It's 1981, the slasher boom is in full swing, and the studio pressure to compete with the new splatter standards is completely apparent. We move away from the bloodless restraint of the original foundation and step into high technicality, surgical violence. The kitchen knife is still there, but now we're adding therapeutic tubs, scalping needles, and diagnostic equipment to the toolkit.
And psychologically, this is the episode where the entire franchise architecture is fundamentally altered. This is the birth of the sister twist. For better or worse, the void we profiled last time gets an identity, and Laurie Strode's psychological sanctuary isn't just broken, it's tethered to the monster by blood. We're tracking a heavily sedated, traumatized final girl trapped in a dark maze while her worst nightmare systematically hunts down her support system.
From a construction standpoint, moving the setting from open suburban streets to a confined institutional space completely changes the geometry of the scare. Haddonfield Memorial Hospital is a masterpiece of isolation. It's a massive facility that feels entirely empty. The endless, dark, linoleum-tiled hallways create a terrifying depth of field. Carpenter and Cundy's signature widescreen composition returns, but instead of hedges and picket fences, Michael is now materializing from elevator shafts and dark supply closets. But behind the scenes, this build wasn't seamless. Carpenter reportedly looked at Rosenthal's original cut and found it lacking the tension of the original, so he stepped in himself to direct some reshoots and tighten the pacing. It's a house built by two different contractors, and you can see the structural friction in the final edit.
The visceral ledger for Halloween 2 is heavy, aggressive, and mean. Michael isn't just a shadow anymore, he's an executioner. The hydrotherapy kill. This is a technical mic drop for the 1981 slasher era. The boiling of Nurse Karen in the therapy tub is a massive escalation from the bloodless choking of 1978. It's loud, agonizing, and highly visual. The absolute void of the needle, the air embolus kill, and the fluid drain from the nurse's desk show a technical coldness. Michael handles medical instruments with the same casual curiosity he showed with Bob's head tilt. He is treating human bodies like faulty biological machinery that needs to be systematically turned off.
We have to dissect the psychological earthquake of this film. Michael and Laurie are siblings. By making Laurie Michael's sister, the film repairs the motiveless void we loved in the first audit. Suddenly, Michael isn't a random, terrifying act of cosmic malice. He's a guy completing a family checklist. It shrinks the scale of the horror from an urban legend down to a domestic tragedy. Laurie is psychologically paralyzed in this film. She spends the majority of the runtime in a hospital bed, physically and chemically incapacitated. Her agency is stripped away, turning her from an intuitive survivor into a literal, cornered animal. The horror comes from her brain screaming at her to run, while her body refuses to cooperate.
It's a massive, fiery expansion to the original house, leading to a literal explosive finale that felt, at the time, like a definitive closing of the case files.
Loomis turning that oxygen tank into a bomb? That's how you close a ledger with authority.
But as we know, the studio never lets a profitable foundation rest in peace.
Exactly. So before we start tearing down the walls of this 1981 hospital run, let's put it to the table standard. Chloe, hit us with the official scare table prompt for this episode.
All right, boys, the ledger is open. What is the one thing you absolutely loved about Halloween 2? And what is the one logic leak or structural choice you would change or fix? I'll go first. Let's reopen the psychological evaluation of the shape, because the 1981 blueprint completely shatters the diagnosis we pulled together for the 78 Foundation. By introducing the bloodline connection, revealing that Laurie is Michael's biological sister, the architects completely rewired his internal map. We aren't dealing with a motiveless, wandering void anymore. This is a targeted, hyper-fixated, familial annihilation protocol. Let's break down his psychological state in this hospital run. In the original audit, Michael's behavior was random and territorial. He went back to his childhood home and killed anyone who stepped onto his grid. But Halloween 2 changes the why. Now, Michael is operating on a specific internal checklist. Judith was first, Laurie is next. Psychologically, this shifts him from a cosmic threat to an obsessive-compulsive predator. The minute he hears Laurie's name on that radio broadcast in the opening minutes, his brain locks onto a singular coordinates fix. The hospital isn't just a random location, it's the final room on his checklist. He is systematically removing anyone who stands between him and the completion of his family unit's destruction. What's fascinating here is how his relationship with his victims changes. In 78, Michael had a bizarre, almost childlike curiosity, the head tilt, the ghost costume. In 1981, that curiosity turns incredibly clinical and sadistic. Look at how he utilizes the hospital equipment. The hydrotherapy tub, the hypodermic needles, the diagnostic tubes. He is adapting to his environment like a virus. Psychologically, this shows a higher level of cognitive maliciousness. He isn't just striking out. He is deliberately choosing methods of execution that mirror the very setting meant for healing. He is turning the tools of preservation into tools of termination, which shows an absolute, mocking contempt for human life. Finally, we have to look at his physical psychology in this film. Dick Warlock's portrayal of the shape is much more rigid, robotic, and deliberate than Nick Castle's in the original. He moves with zero urgency, even when being shot at by Loomis or chased by guards. Psychologically, this gives him the aura of a somnambulist, a literal sleepwalker. It's as if Michael isn't fully conscious in our world. He is moving to the rhythm of a dark, internal monologue that only he can hear. He doesn't register pain, he doesn't react to sound, and he doesn't flinch. For Laurie, this is a psychological death sentence. How do you mentally combat a predator that behaves like an automated machine? You can't outsmart an entity that is completely dissociated from human limitations. So my psychological verdict for the 81 shape? The sister twist makes him a more conventional, localized monster, but his clinical detachment in that dark hospital makes him feel like a machine that won't stop until the battery is entirely drained. Which brings me to my standard table check. The one thing I loved. The absolute psychological dread of the radio broadcast scene. The way Michael overhears Laurie's destination through a passing car radio is a perfect technical beat. It shows that even in a world of random noise, his brain is entirely tuned to her frequency. The one thing I would change. I would have kept the sister twist hidden from the audience just a little longer. Having Loomis and Marion Chambers figure it out via files, while the audience already knows, strips away some of the psychological mystery. I wanted to feel that revelation with Laurie in the climax, rather than watching the pieces fall into place from the outside.
It's a brutal breakdown, Chloe. Turning him into a machine makes the walls feel even tighter.
And a machine doesn't care how many bullets you put into its chassis.
All right, Marcus, you're up next. Let's get into the visceral ledger. Let's put this 1981 hospital gore under the microscope.
All right, let's fire up the bone saw and step into the visceral ledger of 1981. If the 78 film was a lesson in artistic restraint, Halloween 2 is a lesson in industrial execution. Like Shane said, it's 1981. The slasher market is saturated, and the standard for on-screen violence has fundamentally shifted. To compete, John Carpenter himself stepped in during post-production to shoot extra gore cues because the original cut was technically too soft for the changing market. The result? A film that takes the clinical, sterile architecture of a hospital and uses it to maximize bodily trauma. Michael isn't just using the standard kitchen knife anymore. He's auditing the hospital's inventory. He treats the medical supply room like a buffet of structural destruction. The syringe air embolism. This is a high technicality kill. Injecting an air bubble directly into Nurse Janet's temple is completely silent, deeply invasive, and terrifyingly clinical. There is no blood, but the visceral reaction comes from the sheer vulnerability of the target, the needle entering skin in a place meant for healing. The fluid drain, Dr. Mixter. Pushing a needle straight into the doctor's eye socket is a pure shock to the system. It's a direct attack on the audience's sensory organs. By taking out the doctor first, Michael doesn't just kill a character. He systematically dismantles the hospital's authority structure. Let's talk about the big one, Nurse Karen in the hydrotherapy tub. This is the visceral anchor of the entire film. Michael lifts her off her feet with a mechanical, single-arm strength that proves his human anatomy is just a shell. He holds her under water that has been technically modified to a boiling temperature. We don't just see her drown, we see the physical degradation of her skin under the heat. The close-up shots of her face turning crimson are incredibly aggressive for a franchise that started out bloodless. It's a loud, agonizing, steam-filled kill that completely shatters the 78 illusion of restraint. Michael isn't just displaying his work anymore, he's cooking it. Then you have the lift and drain with Nurse Marshall. Michael uses a diagnostic tube to completely drain her blood supply onto the floor while he just stands there, watching the pool grow. From a visceral standpoint, the horror comes from the rhythmic mechanics of death. The sound of the blood hitting the linoleum tile replaces the musical score. It's a slow, cold, mathematical countdown of a human life hitting zero. And the way he lifts her up using a scalpel? The physical leverage required for that kind of kill shifts Michael away from standard human physics and solidifies him as a heavy machinery monster. So, looking at the entire layout of the 1981 body count, it is vastly more aggressive, bloody, and mean-spirited than the original foundation. It traded the poetry of shadows for the reality of the morgue. Which brings me to my official table verdict. The one thing I loved. The absolute audacity of the hydrotherapy tub kill. It's iconic, it's brutal, and it perfectly utilizes the institutional setting to create a scare that stays with you physically. It's the moment Halloween officially announced it could play in the heavy metal sandbox of the 80s. The one thing I would change. I would fix the Nurse Jill liftoff logic leak. When Michael lifts her off the ground using nothing but a scalpel under her chin, the physics are totally broken. A standard scalpel blade would snap or slice completely through under that much body weight before lifting a person 3 feet in the air. I'd have him use a heavy orthopedic bone hook or a piece of rebar from the parking lot, something with the structural integrity to actually support the visceral weight of that kill.
That scalpel lift always felt like a major bend in the physics blueprint.
But visually, it's a haunting image. The feet dangling above the floorboards.
All right, the blood has been analyzed and the mind has been profiled. It's my turn to step up to the drafting board and break down the behind-the-scenes structural design of Haddonfield Memorial. Let's look at how they built this trap. From a production standpoint, translating the open, suburban perimeter of the original film into a tightly enclosed, multi-level clinical grid was a massive gamble. Rick Rosenthal stepped into a house already built by John Carpenter, and behind the scenes, the construction of this sequel was an absolute battle of structural philosophies. Moving the narrative inside Haddonfield Memorial Hospital completely shifts the geometry of how tension is built. Here's a major behind-the-scenes secret. Haddonfield Memorial wasn't just one building. The production stitched the location together using 3 different hospitals across the Los Angeles area, including the Morningside Hospital, which had recently been closed down. Because Morningside was decommissioned, Dean Cundey had total freedom to manipulate the environment. He used those endless, vacant corridors to create an overwhelming depth of field. In widescreen, Those long hallways act like a funnel. There are no side streets to escape into, no neighbor's yard to run toward. The institutional architecture strips away the suburban safety net and turns the entire runtime into a claustrophobic cage match. Dean Cundey's return as cinematographer is what keeps the structural integrity of this film tethered to the 1978 original. He brought back the signature chiaroscuro high-contrast lighting, but he adapted it for a clinical setting. Instead of the warm, inviting amber tones of suburban living rooms, Cundey blankets the hospital in cold, sickly greens and stark blues. He purposely left massive pockets of pure blackness at the ends of hallways and inside patient rooms. It defies real-world hospital lighting logic, but technically, it works perfectly. It transforms a place of sterile observation into a place where the infrastructure itself actively hides the predator. Michael doesn't just walk down the hall, he emerges from the building's structural blind spots. We have to talk about the friction between the contractors on this job. Rick Rosenthal wanted to make a suspense film that completely mirrored Carpenter's original pacing, heavy on atmosphere, light on blood. When John Carpenter saw the first cut, he felt the structure was failing. The pacing was too slow for an audience that had just witnessed the high-octane violence of Friday the 13th the year before. Carpenter took the scalpel into his own hands. He stepped behind the camera himself to direct several of the high-gore reshoots Marcus was just raving about, and he radically sped up the editing pace. He also pumped up the iconic score, adding synthesizers to give the original piano melody a heavier, more aggressive, gothic industrial drive. The movie we got is a literal hybrid, a suspense-driven blueprint frantically retrofitted to meet the commercial demands of the 1981 splatter boom. So, when you audit the physical framework of Halloween 2, you're looking at a fascinating piece of cinema construction. It's a sequel that is constantly fighting itself, trying to be a classy tone poem of suspense while simultaneously trying to be a frontline slasher. But because the location scouting and the lighting grid were so flawless, the framework holds under pressure. Which brings me to my final table verdict for the 81 expansion. The one thing I loved, the visual framing of the elevator shafts and stairwells. The sequence where Laurie is limping down those massive industrial concrete stairs while the shape tracks her from above is pure architectural terror. It uses vertical space perfectly to show just how small, broken, and trapped she really is against an elevated threat. The one thing I would change, I would demolish the empty hospital logic leak. I understand it's a late-night shift in a small town, but Haddonfield Memorial has about 4 nurses, 1 doctor, and a single security guard on duty for an entire multi-wing facility. There isn't a single patient in the hallways, and no emergency room traffic on the night a mass murderer just tore through the town? I'd add a few background tracking shots of overloaded emergency rooms down in another wing, showing that our characters were intentionally pushed into a closed-off, under-construction section of the building. That shores up the structural logic of their isolation.
Yeah, the skeletal staff always felt like a budget constraint masking as a plot point.
But it feeds that psychological nightmare of screaming for help in a building designed for care and realizing nobody is on the clock.
And with that, the ledger on the 1981 hospital expansion is officially stamped, approved, and archived. The house of Michael and Laurie has been built, expanded, and ultimately blown sky high in a room full of oxygen tanks.
The perfect ending. Case closed, right?
If only. The studio looked at that pile of ash and realized they still owned the land. But instead of rebuilding the same house, they decided to build an entirely different amusement park next door.
The files are sealed for Halloween 2. Now, the scare table takes a hard left turn into the ultimate wildcard anomaly of horror history. No Michael Myers, no Laurie Strode, just silver shamrocks, druidic microchips, and a countdown to the apocalypse. Get your masks ready for Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
I put a spell on you because you're mine. You better stop the things you do. ain't lying. I ain't lying. You know I can't stand it. You're running around. You know better, mama. I can't stand it, 'cause you put me down.
Clear the table completely. Wipe down the grid, throw away the old blueprints, and throw out everything you think you know about this franchise ledger. Welcome to Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, 1982. Architecturally, this isn't an extension or a renovation of the house we just spent 2 episodes auditing. This is an entirely different structure built on the exact same piece of real estate. Tommy Lee Wallace stepped in as director, and John Carpenter and Deborah Hill attempted a radical, high-risk technical pivot, turning Halloween into an annual anthology series. They blew Michael and Laurie to pieces in 1981, and in 1982, they tried to hand the audience a brand new house of horrors.
Viscerally, we are stepping out of the slasher sandbox entirely and dropping straight into a sci-fi body horror nightmare. There are no kitchen knives here, no stealthy shadows under a clothesline. Instead, the visceral ledger is packed with corporate assassins in business suits, laser beams, melting faces, and a biological assault weapon consisting of literal bugs, snakes, and ancient stone dust. It is weird, it is mean, and it is beautifully grotesque.
And psychologically, this film shifts from localized familial dread to mass industrial nihilism. We're auditing a corporate conspiracy that targets the most vulnerable demographic possible, the children of America. The psychological architecture here is built around the terrifying realization that the things we welcome into our homes, commercials, toys, television, can be weaponized against us. It's an absolute mind meld of ancient witchcraft and corporate consumerism.
From a design perspective, the film swaps the claustrophobic hospital corridors for the eerie, synthetic perfection of a company town. The town of Santa Mira is a masterclass in architectural control. It's an entirely manufactured community built around the Silver Shamrock factory. Tommy Lee Wallace uses the layout of the town to create a corporate panopticon, surveillance cameras on every street corner, curfew alarms, and automated factories. It feels sterile, mechanical, and fundamentally wrong. Behind the scenes, the production design had to marry 2 completely conflicting ideas: ancient Celtic paganism and high-tech 1980s electronics. The architecture of Connell Cochran's factory layout reflects this. It's a sleek assembly line of plastic masks, but hidden right in the center is a stolen fragment of Stonehenge. It's a literal bridge between the prehistoric past and the digital future.
The visceral impact of Halloween 3 is pure, unadulterated nightmare fuel that completely earned its R rating. The test room execution, the Buddy Kupfer kill. This is the visceral anchor of the entire film. A little boy puts on a pumpkin mask, sits in front of a flashing TV screen, and the technical audio cue triggers a total biological collapse. His face melts from the inside out into a swarming mass of live crickets, rattlesnakes, and centipedes. It is a disgusting practical effects masterclass that completely shatters the rules of what horror movies were allowed to do to kids in 1982. The android dismemberment. The violence committed by and against Cochrane's suit-wearing enforcers has a cold mechanical crunch, necks being twisted until the skin rips, fingers being jammed straight through skulls, and orange synthetic fluid pouring out instead of blood. It gives the violence a bizarre, unnatural weight.
We have to analyze the absolute madness of Conal Cochrane's psychological profile. Cochrane doesn't use fear to pull his victims in. He uses marketing. He creates an addictive television jingle, pairs it with a commercial countdown, and watches as millions of families willingly buy into their own execution. Psychologically, it exploits the innocence of childhood trust and parental complacency. The finale of this film leaves us with one of the most psychologically distressing cliffhangers in horror history. Dr. Chalice screaming into the telephone line, begging the network executives to turn off the commercial, while the countdown hits 0. The psychological payload is the absolute uncertainty, the creeping dread that the transmission got through, and the realization that the system cannot be stopped.
It is a wild, brilliantly chaotic anomaly in the franchise timeline. It was rejected by audiences in 1982 because they wanted the guy in the white mask, but 50 years later, its structural integrity has aged like fine wine.
It traded a knife for a swarm of bugs, and honestly, it hits like a freight train.
It's a psychological warning about the screens we let our kids stare at.
The ledger is open, the silver shamrock jingle is playing in the background, and it's time for our standard table check.
All right, boys, let's audit the season of the witch. What is the one thing you absolutely loved about Halloween 3? And what is the one logic leak or structural choice you would change or fix? Marcus, give us your report first.
All right, let's step up to the slab because the visceral ledger on Halloween 3 is one of the nastiest, most unapologetically cruel breakdowns we will ever run on this podcast. In 1982, audiences were furious because they didn't get a giant guy in a jumpsuit slashing teenagers. But if you actually audit the sheer ferocity of what Tommy Lee Wallace put on screen, it blows the standard slasher body count out of the water. This film drops the kitchen knife and replaces it with biochemical, techno-pagan mutilation. It treats the human body like an organic container waiting to be ruptured by ancient corporate malice. Let's start with the absolute crown jewel of 80s body horror, Little Buddy Kupfer in the Silver Shamrock test room. This is a high technicality sequence that breaks the ultimate taboo, the graphic, agonizing execution of a child. Buddy is sitting there in his pumpkin mask, completely mesmerized by the flashing silver shamrock strobe on the TV screen. The audio frequency triggers the microchip on the mask's backing, which contains a literal microscopic fragment of Stonehenge. The microchip doesn't just shock him, it acts as a localized catalyst for ancient witchcraft. His face literally implodes, melting into a synthetic biological sludge. And then come the snakes, the crickets, and the centipedes swarming out of the mouth hole of the mask. Viscerally, it is a disgusting, claustrophobic masterclass in practical special effects. It attacks your senses because you are watching a child's innocent excitement instantly transform into a squirming, suffocating mass of rot. Then we have to audit the violence surrounding Conal Cochrane's suited android henchmen. Because they are synthetic, the film gets away with an entirely different flavor of brutality. In the opening act, an android walks into a hospital room, stands over a vulnerable old man, and calmly jams its fingers straight into his skull, ripping his eyes and brain apart with mechanical pressure. There is no emotion, no struggle, just pure hydraulic force. When Dr. Chalice fights back later in the factory, the visceral feedback shifts from blood to industrial fluids. Ripping an android's head off with a tire iron or watching them get crushed by machinery reveals a thick, milky orange synthetic goo pouring out of their wires. It gives the violence a bizarre, unnatural weight. It feels cold, crunchy, and robotic. Let's talk about poor Marge Gutman, who makes the fatal mistake of picking at the silver shamrock button with a hairpin in her motel room. She accidentally triggers the microchip, and a localized blue laser beam shoots out of the medallion, hitting her directly in the mouth. The camera doesn't blink. We get a horrific, lingering close-up of her face post-blast. Her lips are completely burned away, her teeth are exposed, and a live, writhing insect crawls out from the charred cavity of her throat. It's a beautifully grotesque piece of effects work by Dick Smith and Tom Berman that shows Cochrane's technology doesn't just kill, it mutates and degrades the human anatomy. So if anyone tries to tell you that Halloween 3 doesn't have the teeth of a true horror movie, show them this ledger. It trades the single-target slash for a weaponized industrial meat grinder. Which brings me to my official table report, the one thing I loved. It has to be the utter brutality of the Buddy Kupfer room. In a decade where horror movies were getting censored left and right, having the stones to show a kid and his parents getting completely wiped out by bugs and snakes inside a corporate test cage is legendary. It sets the stakes at absolute maximum. You realize nobody is safe. The one thing I would change, I would fix the instant decapitation logic leak when Chalice fights the android guard in the factory. Chalice is an out-of-shape, heavily drinking small-town doctor, yet he manages to cleanly rip the head off a high-tech, metal-and-wire android with a basic leverage pull. Viscerally, I wanted that fight to feel heavier. Give Chalice a heavy piece of industrial factory equipment, like a pneumatic wrench or a forklift hook, to tear that synthetic skull off its chassis. Make us feel the metal snapping.
That's a fair structural edit. Chalice definitely gets a sudden burst of action hero strength in that third act.
But psychologically, the desperation of a guy realizing his entire species is about to be turned into bug food will give you a lot of adrenaline.
True.
All right, the visceral horror is on the board. Chloe, you're up next. Let's unwrap the corporate, consumer-driven mind control of Conal Cochrane. Give us the psychological breakdown.
All right, let's step inside the corporate boardroom of Conal Cochrane, because psychologically, Halloween 3 is a terrifyingly brilliant critique of mass consumerism and subliminal control. Last episode, we talked about Michael Myers being an automated sleepwalking machine, but Cochrane is a master architect of human behavior. He doesn't need to stalk you through the bushes because he's already convinced you to open your front door, hand him your cash, and sit your kids right in front of his delivery system. Let's break down the psychological blueprint of this corporate cult. Let's start with that infamous silver shamrock commercial.
Happy Halloween, 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 happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the horror-thon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
It is a psychological assault disguised as a festive countdown. The jingle uses a relentless, repetitive melody that triggers an immediate earworm effect. In psychology, this is a form of auditory conditioning. By pairing a beloved, nostalgic holiday with a mandatory viewing schedule, and don't forget to watch the big giveaway at 9, Cochrane creates a nationwide compulsion. He takes the safest, most predictable domestic routine, a family gathered around a television set, and turns it into a psychological execution chamber. The brilliance of his trap is that the victims are active participants. They aren't being dragged kicking and screaming, they are counting down the seconds until their own destruction. Cochrane isn't a traditional horror villain. He doesn't display rage, lust, or a desire for political power. He describes himself as a simple joke maker. The joke's on them, he says. Psychologically, Cochrane operates on a level of absolute, detached nihilism. He views modern society with profound contempt. To him, humanity has sanitized the ancient, bloody, terrifying realities of the world into plastic masks and cheap candy. His psychological drive is to strip away the commercial veneer of Halloween and force humanity to pay its ancient, primal debts. He is a cosmic prankster pulling off the ultimate trick. By framing a mass sacrifice as a corporate giveaway, he satisfies his twisted sense of humor while systematically resetting the balance between mankind and the ancient dark. We also have to look at the psychological weight of the town itself. Santa Mira is populated by silent, unblinking androids in business suits. When Dr. Chalice and Ellie walk through the town, the psychological dread comes from the uncanny valley. The citizens look human, but their behavior is rigid, hollow, and perfectly synchronized. For Chalice, the horror builds as he realizes there is no authority to appeal to. You can't reason with an automated workforce. When Ellie is ultimately captured and replaced by an android double, it is the ultimate psychological violation. The person you love is gone, replaced by a perfect, smiling corporate proxy designed to destroy you. It breeds absolute paranoia. Anyone around you could be a hollow shell operating on Cochrane's frequency. So, looking at the psychological map of Season of the Witch, it is an incredibly bleak, forward-thinking piece of horror. It tells us that our televisions are windows, and we have no idea who is looking back at us from the other side of the glass. Which brings me to my official table verdict. The one thing I loved, the pure psychological warfare of the final frame. Chalice screaming into the phone, desperately trying to get the third network channel turned off, while the silver shamrock jingle blares and the strobe lights flash. It's a flawless masterpiece of unresolved tension. It leaves the audience sitting in the dark, wondering if the kids across the street just put their masks on. The one thing I would change. I would deepen the psychological exploration of Ellie's replacement. We find out she was turned into an android off-screen, and she suddenly attacks Chalice in the car like a mindless drone. I think it would have been a massive psychological twist if she acted perfectly normal during the escape, forcing Chalice, and the audience, to figure out she was a synthetic trap only when she quietly tries to steer them back towards Santa Mira. Make the betrayal a slow, creeping realization rather than a sudden action movie jump scare.
Wow, that would have made the drive out of town incredibly tense. A great structural adjustment, Chloe.
Yeah, playing dumb with a killer android in the passenger seat, that's premium anxiety.
All right, the mind has been parsed, the gore has been audited, and the corporate architecture of Santa Mira is fully mapped out. It's my turn to step up to the drafting board and look at the behind-the-scenes engineering of this beautiful anomaly. Let's look at how the studio built a Halloween movie without Michael Myers. Behind the scenes, this movie is a masterclass in creative risk management. The studio, Dino De Laurentiis, and Universal found themselves in a unique position. Halloween 2 had been a financial hit, but the narrative blueprint of Michael Myers was completely spent. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill explicitly stated they would only stay on as executive producers if they could turn the franchise into an annual anthology series, a brand new horror story every October. They wanted to build a whole new neighborhood on the same foundation, and they picked Tommy Lee Wallace to be the foreman. From a physical architecture standpoint, creating the company town of Santa Mira required a very specific design language. To build a town that felt entirely isolated, sterile, and controlled, the production team shot on location in Lolita, California, a tiny dairy town. Its historic, slightly dated architecture provided the perfect contrast to the high-tech, futuristic infrastructure of the Silver Shamrock factory. Tommy Lee Wallace and his crew deliberately built surveillance into the set designs. Notice the security cameras mounted on old-school wooden telephone poles, the loudspeakers blasting curfew warnings over pristine lawns, and the stark, white, windowless walls of the Silver Shamrock facility itself. The architecture tells the audience that the entire town is a functional trap designed by Connell Cochrane to monitor and process human data. Because the budget was a lean $2.5 million, the crew had to use immense structural ingenuity to pull off a sci-fi, pagan apocalypse. The massive Silver Shamrock factory complex wasn't fully real. The production relied heavily on stunning, high-technicality matte paintings created by special effects artist Albert Whitlock. When you see Chalice looking at the sprawling, glowing industrial grid of the factory nestled into the dark California hills, you're looking at a brilliant visual illusion designed to make a low-budget indie film feel massive and clinical. Behind the scenes, That massive slab of Stonehenge sitting in the high-tech laboratory wasn't stone at all, it was sculpted foam. But the lighting crew used low-angle, hard contrast spots and a heavy fog machine to give it a dense, ancient weight. It physically anchors the third act, forcing the primitive and the digital to occupy the exact same frame. We cannot do a forensic audit of Halloween 3 without looking at the construction of the soundscape. John Carpenter and Alan Howarth returned to completely redesign the audio blueprint. They threw out the iconic 5/4 piano theme from the first two films. Instead, they built an entirely electronic, synthesizer-heavy score using step sequencers. The music doesn't just play in the background, it acts like a mechanical heartbeat pulsing through the film. The Silver Shamrock jingle itself, set to the tune of "London Bridge is Falling Down," was an architectural weapon. Tommy Lee Wallace actually voiced the announcer in the commercial himself. The audio track was deliberately mixed with a shrill, piercing electronic alarm sound at the end of the countdown. It was technically designed to irritate and hypnotize the listener, creating an auditory glitch that mirrors the flashing strobe on the screen. It is one of the most effective uses of audio as a scare tactic in film history. When you look at the raw mechanics of how Halloween 3 was put together, it's an incredibly tight, beautifully shot, technically ambitious piece of filmmaking. It failed at the box office in 1982 for one simple reason: false advertising. The audience went to the theater expecting a familiar house, and the studio handed them a corporate factory instead. But 50 years later, the structural integrity of this standalone build is undeniable. Which brings me to my final table report for the Silver Shamrock expansion. The one thing I loved: the opening title sequence. Instead of the traditional glowing pumpkin carving, we get an abstract, bright orange digital line slowly drawing a jagged pumpkin face across a pitch-black television screen via computer graphics. It tells the architect everything he needs to know in 60 seconds. The analog world is dead, and the digital nightmare has officially begun. The one thing I would change? I would shore up the factory break-in logic leak. In the third act, Dr. Chalice manages to sneak into the most heavily fortified, high-tech, android-guarded facility in the world by basically climbing through an unlocked back window and ducking behind a few cardboard boxes. For a corporate dictator who monitors every square inch of the town on a wall of screens, Cochrane's perimeter security is a total technical failure. I'd have Chalice steal the uniform and access badge of one of the android guards he deactivated earlier, using Cochrane's own automated system against him to infiltrate the grid. That gives the break-in a much higher level of technical satisfaction.
Oh, absolutely. Wearing the suit of the machine to beat the machine? That fits the visceral tone perfectly.
And psychologically, walking past those unblinking cameras while pretending to be an android would keep your pulse hitting maximum limits.
And with that, our forensic audit of the 1982 Silver Shamrock anomaly is signed, sealed, and stamped into the ledger.
But the franchise isn't done playing tricks on us. The studio took a 6-year break, realized the anthology experiment was a commercial bust, and decided it was time to dust off the old overalls.
After a 6-year freeze, they decided it was time to dig up the old blueprints, dust off the coveralls, and head straight back to Haddonfield.
But things have changed on the home front. Laurie Strode is out of the picture, and the psychological burden of the bloodline has officially trickled down to a completely new generation.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the horror-thon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
It's almost time. All those lucky kids with silver shamrock masks, hurry home for the big giveaway. It's almost time. Hurry home.
Before we pack up our notes tonight, let me give you a quick diagnostic preview of what we're walking into with this Jamie Lloyd trilogy. If you thought the hospital run was intense, this next stretch of the ledger completely rewires the psychological stakes. We are tracking a 4-year narrative arc spanning from 1988 to 1995, and the architecture of the shape undergoes a radical, almost desperate transformation. We move from a simple slasher hunt into a full-blown, dark pagan conspiracy. Here is a quick look at the blueprints hitting the table next.
We start with a complete structural reset. Michael Myers wakes up from a 10-year comatose state after hearing a single word: niece. The psychological target is now a traumatized, orphaned 9-year-old girl.
Then, the blueprint starts to warp. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, takes a hard left turn into gothic surrealism. Jamie is institutionalized, rendered mute, and trapped in a telepathic tether with her uncle. It's a messy, claustrophobic build featuring a bizarre, silent man in black lurking in the peripheral frame, signaling that the structural logic of this franchise is beginning to fracture from the inside out.
Finally, we hit the terminal point of this timeline, Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. This is where the why we've been auditing gets a massive, controversial injection of ancient lore. We are stepping into the cult of Thorn. The settings shift to cold, brutalist sanitarium labs and underground ritual chambers. So clean your lenses, check your audio levels, and get ready for the family reunion from hell. Whew, the shape comes home for his bloodline.
The mirror is a stranger, and the air is getting thin. I can't escape this hell, I can't crawl out of my skin. I think I'm losing my mind. I'm standing on the edge of everything I've known, waiting for a heartbeat in a chest of hollow stone. I can't control it, the pulse beneath the surface. The animal I have become is searching for a purpose. Help me believe it's not the only way to breathe, to run away from everyone, to finally leave. But the numbness is a predator, it's starving for a thrill. I'd rather feel pain than be this hauntingly still. This was a cold and ugly place, a gallery of ghosts, and no one ever said a word to those who need it most. It's not too late, it's never too late to break the lock, to find the key inside the ribs and stop the ticking clock. I'll never be the same, the skin is shedding off the bone. Somebody help me through this nightmare, I'm tired of being alone. I can't control it, I'd rather feel the sting and the strain. Give me the sickness, give me the truth, give me the pain. I'm looking for a way to stay alive in the fight. Even if I have to scream, it'll be alright. The world is dark and I am cold and I am losing grip. The memories are sinking like a broken wooden ship. I'm paralyzed, watching the animal take the wheel. You're sick of feeling nothing, you just wanna feel. Tell me I'm not the only one drowning in the dry, searching for a reason in a scorching empty sky. This world's a cold and ugly place, it's written in the scars, and no one ever said a word while we were reaching for the stars. It's not too late, it's never too late to start the fire, to pull the soul out of the wreck and drag it through the mire. I'll never be the same, the skin is shedding off the bone. Somebody help me through this nightmare, I'm tired of being alone. I can't control it, I'd rather feel the sting and the strain. Give me the sickness, give me the truth, give me the pain. I'm looking for a way to stay alive in the fight. Even if I have to scream, it'll be alright. Be alright. The animal I've become is the only thing I know. It's the shadow in the corner and the voice that's screaming go. Pain, I can't get enough of the friction and the heat. Pain is the only thing that makes the heart continue to beat. No one ever said it'd be this hard to find a track, to find a way to the start and bring the spirit back. I can't escape, but I'm not turning back. This world's a cold and ugly place, but I'm still standing here, and no one ever said a word to take away the fear. It's not too late, it's never too late to change the view, to kill the animal and find the person that was you. I'll never be the same, the skin is clean. It's never too late to wash the conscience clean. The animal I have become is finally lying down. I'm trading in the thorns for a different kind of crown. It's never too late. Stay alive.
All right, the table is locked, the grids are calibrated, and the coffee is black. Welcome back to the Scare Table. Today, we are opening the vault on one of the most tragic, chaotic, and structurally fascinating eras in slasher history, the Jamie Lloyd trilogy, Halloween 4, 5, and 6. Architecturally, this era is a massive rescue and rebuild operation. After the audience completely rejected the anthology experiment of Season of the Witch in 1982, the studio took a 6-year hiatus to clear the debris. In 1988, they brought back the original contractor team, metaphorically speaking, and built a multi-film narrative arc that shifted the franchise from a simple neighborhood stalker story into a multi-layered, dark, gothic mythos.
Viscerally, the ledger for this trilogy undergoes a wild, escalating transformation. We start in 1988 with a clean, high-efficiency slasher blueprint that relies on brute force and high body counts. By 1989, it warps into an experimental, mean-spirited Gothic tone. And by 1995, the dam completely breaks. Halloween 6, especially the producer's cut versus the theatrical P-fan cut, delivers some of the most aggressive, high-splatter, industrial-strength violence of the entire franchise. Michael trades the stealthy slip and slice for pure, hydraulic, bone-crushing.
And psychologically, this is the most devastating stretch of the entire franchise architecture. We are auditing the systematic demolition of a child's mind. Jamie Lloyd, played brilliantly by Danielle Harris, is an orphaned, traumatized 9-year-old girl who isn't just hunted by her uncle. She is telepathically tethered to him. We're tracking trauma that trickles down the bloodline, culminating in a subterranean druidic cult conspiracy that completely reframes the shape from a cosmic void into a cursed biological weapon. It's heavy, it's bleak, and it completely alters the psychological foundation.
From a structural design perspective, this trilogy moves from clean suburban geometry into absolute Gothic decay. The symmetrical fortress, Halloween 4. The finale of H4 features a brilliant piece of spatial architecture. The local townies turn a standard 2-story suburban split level into a barricaded firing line. It shrinks the perimeter, trapping a small group of survivors inside a kill box, while Michael systematically breaches the entry points from the roof down. The Gothic distortion, Halloween 5 and 6. In H5, director Dominique Othenin-Girard makes a radical design choice, swapping the modest Myers house for a massive, towering Victorian Gothic mansion. It defies the geography of Haddonfield, but visually, it turns the setting into a dark fairy tale. By H6, the architecture shifts again to brutalist sanitarium labs, underground concrete chambers, and ritual altars, signaling that the corporate pagan rot has taken over the town's infrastructure.
The body count in this era doesn't just increase, the mechanics of the kills become heavy machinery territory. The thumb-to-skull fracture, Halloween 4. Michael showcases a terrifying mechanical leverage here. Driving his thumb straight through a paramedic's skull or ripping a man's throat out with his bare hands moves him away from a guy with a knife and solidifies him as a human demolition crane. The Operating Room Massacre, Halloween 6. The theatrical cut of The Curse of Michael Myers features a sequence that is pure, high-splatter industrial horror. Michael locks a team of doctors in a laboratory wing under flashing red alarm strobes and systematically butchers them with surgical tools. Necks jammed onto spikes, heads exploded against fuse boxes. It's loud, chaotic, and relentlessly mean.
We have to dissect the absolute psychological tragedy of Jamie Lloyd, the infected protagonist. In Halloween 4, Jamie is an innocent kid wearing a clown costume, a brilliant, chilling echo of young Michael in 1963. The final frame of H4, where she stabs her foster mother, is a psychological masterclass. It suggests that the evil isn't just a physical man, it's a genetic contagion that passes down the bloodline. The telepathic cage. By Halloween 5, the psychological trauma renders Jamie mute. She is trapped inside her own mind, forced to physically experience Michael's kills through a telepathic link. She feels his rage, his coldness, and his proximity. It strips away her psychological sanctuary entirely, turning her into a living radar for a monster that won't stop until her specific branch of the family tree is completely pruned.
It's a massive, multi-tiered narrative build that ultimately fractured behind the scenes due to script overhauls, creative battles, and studio interference. But the sheer ambition of this trilogy is undeniable.
It gave us some of the meanest versions of the shape we've ever seen.
And it proved that in Haddonfield, the family tree grows in very dark soil.
The ledger is open, the tracking sheets are unrolled, and the Jamie Lloyd era is officially on the slab. Chloe, hit us with the opening table prompt for this multi-film audit.
All right, boys, let's set the standard line for this era. Looking across this trilogy, Halloween 4, 5, and 6, what is the one structural choice or thematic arc you absolutely loved? And what is the one logic leak or production flaw you would completely fix or redesign? Shane, take the lead.
Understood. Let's unroll the blue line copies and take this one room at a time. If we're going to do a proper forensic audit of this era, we can't treat it like a single block of concrete. We have to look at the unique architectural blueprints, the behind-the-scenes engineering, and the specific location designs of Halloween 4, 5, and 6 separately to see exactly where the walls were solid and where the foundation cracked. Let's pull up the drafting board for 1988. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, 1988. After the Silver Shamrock anthology experiment completely stalled out at the box office, the studio needed a highly efficient, commercially viable restoration project. Enter director Dwight H. Little and screenwriter Alan B. McElroy. They had a razor-sharp, back-to-basics blueprint. Recreate the atmospheric, small-town suburban dread of the '78 original, but upscaled the structural pacing for a late '80s audience. Because they couldn't film in California due to budget limits, the production team moved the entire grid to Salt Lake City, Utah during a freezing autumn. They used the stark, wide suburban streets of Utah to mimic Haddonfield, using painted leaves on the pavement to hide the fact that summer wasn't quite over when they started rolling. The crown jewel of Halloween 4's architecture is the third-act layout of the Meeker house. Instead of characters scattered across a neighborhood like the '78 film, McElroy collapses the geography. He locks the survivors inside a single, two-story suburban split-level home. The local townies turn this house into a barricaded fortress, nailing boards over the windows, locking the doors, and setting up a literal firing line in the living room. This shifts the spatial tension from stalking to siege architecture. The house becomes a kill box. Michael doesn't just slip through a doorway, he breaches the perimeter systematically. He cuts the power grid, infiltrates the roof structure, and cuts off the escape routes from the top down. It is a brilliant piece of spatial configuration that makes a standard home feel incredibly claustrophobic. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, 1989. Here is where the construction project runs into massive, immediate structural friction. Halloween 4 was a massive box office hit, so Mustafa Akkad rushed a sequel into production to hit a tight one-year turnaround deadline. Dominique Othenin-Girard was brought in to direct, and the cameras started rolling without a finished, locked script. They went back to Salt Lake City, but instead of maintaining the clean, symmetrical suburban architecture established by Dwight Little, Othenin-Girard decided to completely redesign the aesthetic of Haddonfield into something far more stylized and alien. The most jarring architectural choice in Halloween 5 is the total redesign of the Myers house. In the '78 and '88 blueprints, the Myers house was a modest, two-story wooden split-level home, the absolute epitome of standard, unassuming suburban architecture. But in H5, the production team styled a location that is a massive, three-story, towering Victorian Gothic mansion, complete with sweeping staircases, vaulted ceilings, and dark wood paneling. Geographically, it makes absolutely zero sense for Haddonfield. But from a purely visual standpoint, it transforms the climax into a dark, surreal fairy tale. The spatial design shifts from suburban reality into a gothic labyrinth. The endless hallways, laundry chutes, and dark corners of the mansion act like a physical manifestation of Jamie's fractured, traumatized psychology. It's a beautifully shot film, but it represents a massive crack in the franchise's continuity logic. Halloween 6: The Curse of Michael Myers, 1995. 6 years after the box office disappointment of H5, the franchise layout was handed over to Dimension Films and director Joe Chappelle. This build was an absolute disaster zone behind the scenes. Screenwriter Daniel Farrens tried to build a coherent story out of the messy Man in Black clues left in H5, tying Michael's immortality to an ancient Celtic curse called the Cult of Thorn. The production filmed in Salt Lake City once again, but the shoot was plagued by massive script overhauls, a dying Donald Pleasance, and aggressive executive interference. The film ended up with two completely different cuts: the bluesy, lore-heavy producer's cut and the hyper-edited, fast-paced theatrical cut. Architecturally, Halloween 6 completely abandons the cozy, warm safety of suburbia. The environments are cold, sterile, and hostile. The Strode/Myers house. The original Myers house is now occupied by Laurie Strode's extended family. The production design strips the house of any residual warmth, blanketing it in harsh shadows, peeling wallpaper, and an overwhelming sense of decay. The Smith's Grove Sanitarium and Underground Labs. The third act shifts completely to brutalist institutional concrete. We are trapped in maximum security wings, sterile operating rooms under flashing red alarm strobes, and ancient subterranean concrete chambers where the druidic cult operates its genetic machinery. The architecture explicitly tells you that the corporate pagan rot has fully taken over the town's clinical infrastructure. It feels like an industrial meat grinder rather than a small-town nightmare. Now that the layout of each film has been thoroughly mapped out on the slab, I can officially answer Chloe's table prompt. The one structural choice I absolutely loved. Across this entire trilogy, the single structural element I loved the most was the spatial tension of the Meeker House siege in Halloween 4. By taking a subgenre known for open-ended stalking and intentionally bottlenecking the characters into a locked, multi-level suburban fortress, the filmmakers created a masterclass in defensive geometry. Watching the security perimeter slowly crumble from the inside out remains one of the highest technical achievements of the post-Carpenter era. The one logic leak or production flaw I would fix. I would completely demolish the mystery box construction of the Man in Black in Halloween 5. Filming scenes with a mysterious, trench-coat-wearing figure who possesses a matching thorn tattoo without actually knowing who he was or what his story architecture meant is the ultimate definition of lazy construction. It forced Halloween 6 to spend its entire runtime doing frantic retrofitting to explain a plot device that was just thrown on screen for shock value in 1989. If I were managing this project, I would completely delete the Man in Black from H5. Keep the focus entirely on the tight, interpersonal psychological warfare between Dr. Loomis, Jamie, and Michael. Let the franchise breathe without forcing a convoluted, druidic middle management team into a blueprint that was built for a solo predator.
Man, looking at it piece by piece like that, Halloween 5 really did throw a massive wrench into the plumbing, didn't it?
It absolutely did. It traded a solid psychological foundation for a gothic aesthetic mood board. But now that Shane has laid out the physical maps, I'm ready to step in. Let's get into the psychological shifts across these three distinct timelines.
The drafting board is clear, Chloe. Take us deep into the fractured psychology of the Jamie Lloyd era.
All right, boys, let's step up to the analytical couch and run a clinical diagnostic on each room of this trilogy. If we're looking at the psychological architecture of the Jamie Lloyd era, we are tracking a profound structural descent. We watch a franchise shift from a tight, generational trauma study into a surreal, mute state of absolute dissociation, before finally collapsing into an institutional, corporate nightmare of genetic programming. Let's dissect the psychological blueprint of Halloween 4, 5, and 6, one by one. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. In 1988, the Psychological Foundation undergoes a fascinating reset. Laurie Strode is dead, killed off-screen in a car accident, leaving her 9-year-old daughter, Jamie Lloyd, to inherit the absolute weight of the bloodline. Jamie is the ultimate study in suburban vulnerability. She is a sweet, gentle child who is actively being bullied at school for being related to Haddonfield's premier boogeyman. Her psychological sanctuary is already deeply fractured by grief and social isolation before Michael ever wakes up from his 10-year coma. When Michael discovers her existence, his psychological drive shifts from random territorial defense to a hyper-targeted bloodline annihilation. But the real masterstroke of Halloween 4's script architecture is that the trauma isn't one-sided. The film introduces the terrifying psychological concept that evil is a communicable disease. Michael isn't just trying to kill Jamie, his very presence is actively infecting her. This all builds to that iconic, chilling finale. Jamie stands at the top of the stairs, clad in the exact same clown costume her uncle wore in 1963, holding a pair of bloody scissors after attacking her foster mother. Her eyes are completely blank, empty, and devoid of light. Psychologically, it's a brilliant twist. It shifts the horror from an external threat to an internal one. The shape didn't just return, he successfully cloned his pathology into an innocent child. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. And then we hit 1989, and as Shane mentioned, the new creative team panicked and walked back Jamie being an active killer. But what they built instead is a deeply weird, highly distressing study in hysterical trauma. When Halloween 5 opens, Jamie is locked away in the children's clinic of Haddonfield. The trauma of the previous year's finale has manifested physically. She is completely mute and suffers from violent, convulsive seizures. Her agency has been entirely stripped away. She can no longer speak for herself, so the adults around her, specifically a manic, increasingly unhinged Dr. Loomis, treat her less like a victim needing protection and more like a human piece of radar equipment. The psychological core of H5 is the telepathic symbiosis between Jamie and Michael. Jamie doesn't just sense when her uncle is near, she literally internalizes his sensory data. When Michael stabs someone, Jamie experiences the visceral feedback of the kill inside her own nervous system. This creates a truly toxic psychological trap. She is fundamentally tethered to the very monster that wants to erase her. She is a prisoner inside her own skull, forced to act as a voyeur to her friends' executions. The relationship peaks during the infamous laundry chute scene, where Jamie is trapped in a vertical metal coffin, screaming without a voice, while Michael drives a knife through the metal. It's pure, agonizing helplessness, the absolute bottoming out of a child's psychological sanctuary. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. 6 years later, we hit the absolute terminal velocity of this timeline with Halloween 6. The psychological landscape here is completely devoid of warmth, moving into deep, corporate pagan nihilism. Jamie Lloyd's arc is brought to a brutally cold, clinical conclusion in the opening act. She is no longer just a hunted child. She has been institutionalized by a subterranean druidic network, the Cult of Thorn, and forced to carry Michael's next of kin to term. The psychological focus of the franchise shifts entirely away from personal, localized terror and into systemic, technological control. By introducing the Cult of Thorn, Daniel Farrands completely rewired the psychology of Michael Myers himself. Michael is no longer a self-governing void or an independent sleepwalker. He is reframed as a biological proxy weapon, manipulated by an underground group of middle management cultists and rogue geneticists led by Dr. Wynn. Psychologically, this completely alters how we view the Shape. He is a curse-bearing entity, an ancient force of nature trapped inside modern, brutalist sanitarium labs. The fear in H6 doesn't come from a lone predator in the shadows. It comes from the terrifying realization that the entire institutional infrastructure of the town, the doctors, the sanitariums, the local authorities, is actively working to cultivate and control the monster. Michael is stripped of his mysterious autonomy and turned into a heavy machinery weapon operating on an ancient, pre-programmed druidic frequency. Now that the clinical files are open for all 3 entries, here is my official audit of the Jamie Lloyd era. The one thematic arc I absolutely loved. Across this trilogy, the thing I absolutely adored was the raw, heartbreaking psychological realism of Danielle Harris's performance in Halloween 4 and 5. Slasher movies in the late 80s were notoriously shallow, treating victims like disposable cattle. But by placing the emotional weight of these films squarely on the shoulders of an incredibly talented child actress, the filmmakers forced the audience to actually care about the human cost of Michael's rampage. Jamie's fear feels authentic, her tears feel real, and her relationship with her sister Rachel provides the only genuine emotional anchor this franchise ever had after Laurie Strode left the grid. The one psychological choice I would completely redesign. I would completely tear down and rebuild the treatment of Jamie Lloyd in Halloween 6. To take a character that audiences spent 2 entire movies watching suffer, bleed, and desperately fight to keep her mind intact, only to bring her back for 15 minutes in a sequel, just to have her impregnated by a cult and violently thrown onto a farm thresher by her uncle? It is a massive, cynical failure of narrative respect. It completely deflates the psychological investment built over the last 7 years. If I were rewriting H6, I would make Jamie the central protagonist of the finale. Keep her alive. Let her use the psychological and telepathic understanding of Michael she developed as a child to actively outsmart him and the Cult of Thorn. Don't turn a brilliant final girl into a disposable plot device just to clear the deck for a new cast. Give her character the psychological vindication she actually earned.
Damn, Chloe, you pulled no punches on H6. That farm equipment kill really is an absolute gut punch to the fans.
It's a total structural collapse of a character arc. You don't build a beautiful narrative column over 2 films just to smash it with a hammer in the first act of the third.
Exactly. Well, now that the maps are drawn and the minds are parsed, it's my turn to step up to the morgue table. Let's look at the actual flesh, bone, and iron of this trilogy. Let's run the visceral audit on the kills of Halloween 4, 5, and 6 separately. All right, clear the slab, grab the bone saws, and let's get down to the grease and iron. If we're auditing the visceral ledger of the Jamie Lloyd trilogy, we are tracking Michael Myers as he evolves from a stealthy, flesh and blood slasher into a heavy machinery demolition crane, before finally exploding into a high-splatter industrial meat grinder. Let's break down the physical trauma, the special effects craftsmanship, and the mechanical brutality of Halloween 4, 5, and 6, room by room. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, 1988. In 1988, special effects coordinator John Carl Buechler stepped in to design a body count that felt modern, heavy, and intensely physical. This film officially marks the transition of Michael Myers into an automated powerlifter. He isn't just using the standard kitchen knife anymore. He's utilizing the pure, crushing leverage of his own anatomy. The thumb to skull fracture. This kill sets the technical line for the whole movie. Michael drives his bare thumb straight through a paramedic's skull during an ambulance transport. Viscerally, it's brilliant because it requires 0 tools, just the terrifying reality of his superhuman physical torque. The shotgun impalement. Look at what he does to Kelly Meeker. He doesn't shoot her with the 12-gauge shotgun he steals. He uses the heavy metal barrel as a blunt force stake, driving it completely through her torso and pinning her carcass right to the drywall. The violence in H4 has a distinct, satisfying crunch. It shows that Michael's hands are weaponized tools. He rips a policeman's throat out, snaps necks with casual twists, and crushes skulls like ripe fruit. It's highly efficient, high-impact mechanical violence. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, 1989. And the visceral tone takes a hard left turn into something incredibly mean-spirited, jagged, and drawn out. Greg Nicotero and the KNBEFX group handled the practical effects here, and they traded the quick, explosive power of H4 for a slow, agonizing, psychological sadism of the blade. The scythe cultivation, spits. Michael utilizes a massive, rusted farm scythe to execute spits while he's distracted in the barn. The close-up tracking shots of the blade piercing through the floorboards and the slow, heavy slicing sound make it feel incredibly invasive and old school. The pitchfork drive, Tina. Tina's death is the emotional and visceral pivot of the film. Michael corners her in the woods, wearing a bizarre, unblinking car salesman mask over his Myers mask, and drives a heavy, multi-pronged pitchfork straight into her chest. The standout technical sequence, though, is the laundry chute trap. Michael repeatedly slams a kitchen knife through the wooden slots of a vertical chute while Jamie is trapped inside. The visceral terror doesn't come from a direct hit. It comes from the anticipation of the metal shearing through skin in a dark, claustrophobic box. It's an aggressive, sweaty, highly uncomfortable slasher experience. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, 1995. Finally, we hit 1995, and the dam completely breaks. This is the absolute peak of high-splatter, industrial-strength brutality for the entire classic timeline. We have two competing blueprints here, the bluesy, cult-heavy producer's cut and the hyper-edited, high-gore theatrical cut. But if we look at the theatrical canvas, it is a non-stop mechanical slaughterhouse. The farm thresher exsanguination. Let's talk about Jamie Lloyd's terminal point on the ledger. Michael corners her in a barn, lifts her up, and violently slams her onto the spinning steel blades of a motorized farm thresher. The machinery activates, and her blood is sprayed across the corn stalks. It is a completely merciless, industrial execution. The operating room blitz. This sequence is a masterclass in chaotic splatter. Michael locks a team of corrupt doctors inside a sterile laboratory wing under flashing, blinding red alarm strobes. He systematically dismantles them with surgical saws and axes. He jams a doctor's neck onto a steel wall spike, explodes another man's head against an electrical fuse box until the skull sparks and smokes, and leaves the floor completely painted in high-volume crimson. The sound design is pumped up with heavy, thrashing industrial metal guitars and crunching Foley effects. It completely strips away the elegant mystery of the original Shadow and turns Michael into a walking, breathing, hydraulic meat grinder. Now that the bodies are on the slab and the effects cues are logged, here is my official verdict on the Jamie Lloyd run. The one visceral beat I absolutely loved. Across this entire trilogy, nothing tops the absolute chaotic fury of the operating room massacre in Halloween 6. Say what you want about the script logic of the Cult of Thorn, but watching a massive, hyper-aggressive version of Michael Myers completely cut loose on a bunch of corrupt scientists under those flashing red strobe lights is pure, unfiltered 90s horror gold. The practical effects work is incredibly mean. The pacing is relentless, and it features some of the heaviest, most creative environmental kills in the entire franchise history. It proved that even in the mid-90s, the shape could out outsplatter the competition. The one logic leak, or FX flaw, I would completely redesign. I would completely recall and incinerate the infamous Kmart mask glitch in Halloween 4. Behind the scenes, the crew ran into a massive technical disaster where they accidentally used a backup mask that had pinkish skin tones and bright blonde hair for a crucial hallway sequence. When you watch H4, there is a sudden, jarring shot where Michael attacks Loomis in the school corridor, and his iconic ghostly visage is replaced by a goofy, brightly lit blonde mask that looks like it was bought off a clearance rack at a local grocery store. It completely shatters the visual continuity and deflates the visceral dread of the scene. If I were the foreman on that set, I would have stopped the cameras immediately, thrown that blonde monstrosity into a campfire, and spent the extra production hours reshooting the sequence with the proper screen-used mask. You cannot let the face of your primary predator glitch that hard on the main stage.
Man, that blonde mask in the school hallway is a legendary production leak. It sticks out like a sore thumb on a widescreen layout.
It completely breaks the illusion of the Phantom. But looking back at the whole trilogy, from the scissors in '88 to the thresher in '95, the sheer volume of physical trauma is staggering.
And with that, the individual audits are officially stamped. The physical maps are drawn, the minds are parsed, and the blood ledger is finalized.
The bone saws are cold, the files are packed, and the table is clear. But our architectural tour of Haddonfield is far from over. The studio looked at the shattered debris of the Cult of Thorn, realized they had built themselves into a total narrative dead end, and decided it was time for the ultimate structural renovation.
The ledger is closed for tonight. Next time, the Scare Table pulls off a massive historical rewrite. We are burning down the entire Jamie Lloyd timeline, throwing out sequels 3 through 6, and building a direct, high-profile 20-year legacy extension that brings Jamie Lee Curtis back to the drafting board. Get your boarding passes ready, because we are heading to private school with Halloween H20, 20 years later.
Beaten what for? Can't take much more.
Here we go, here we go, here we go now.
Fire up that loud. Another round of shots. 1, nothing wrong with me. 2, nothing wrong with me. 3, nothing wrong with me. 4, nothing wrong with me. Turn down for 1, something's got to give. 2, something's got to give. 3, something's got to give now. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor.
Turn down for what?
Push me again, again. This is the end.
Here we go, here we go, here we go. Fire up that loud.
Another round of shots. 1, nothing wrong with me. 2, nothing wrong with me. 3, nothing wrong with me. 4, nothing wrong with me. Turn down for 1, something's got to give. 2, something's got to give. 3, something's got to give now. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor.
Skin against skin, blood and bone. You're all by yourself, but you're not alone. You wanted in and now you're here, driven by hate, consumed by fear.
Another round of shots.
1, nothing wrong with me. 2, nothing wrong with me. 3, nothing wrong with me. 4, nothing wrong with me. Turn down for what?
1, something's got to give. 2, something's got to give. 3, something's got to give now. Let the bodies hit the floor. 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 Hey, go. Hey, go. Fire up that turn down for what?
All right, clean off the drafting board, dump the old files, and forget everything we just logged about druidic marks, telepathic nieces, and underground sanitariums. Welcome to the postmodern remodeling era. Halloween H20, 20 years later, 1998, and Halloween Resurrection, 2002. Architecturally, this run represents a massive, corporate-backed historical rewrite. Dimension Films looked at the cluttered, lore-heavy house that the Jamie Lloyd trilogy built, decided it was a total structural dead end, and brought in a wrecking ball. They hired Scream architect Kevin Williamson to help draft a direct, 20-year legacy extension that acts as a straight sequel to Halloween 2, 1981. They completely demolished sequels 3 through 6, relocated the geography out of Illinois, and tried to modernize the blueprint for the post-Scream multiplex boom.
Viscerally, the Ledger takes a wild ride through the changing landscape of Hollywood horror. In 1998, H20 traded the raw, industrial grime of the 80s and early 90s for a clean, tightly calculated, studio-polished style of violence. The kills are slick, fast, and light on gore, until Laurie takes the axe into her own hands. But by 2002, Resurrection drops us straight into the early 2000s tech boom. The violence gets trashier, meaner, and is captured through the pixelated, jerky lens of wearable webcams and reality TV setups, culminating in some infamous martial arts combat that absolutely bent the physics of the shape.
And psychologically, we are looking at a fascinating study in chronic PTSD and false sanctuaries. H20 gives us an adult Laurie Strode, living under an assumed name, self-medicating, and hiding behind the fortress-like gates of a private boarding school. It's an intimate exploration of a survivor waiting for the other shoe to drop, and what happens when that trauma finally breaches the perimeter. But where H20 finishes with a deeply cathartic psychological execution, Resurrection immediately undercuts it, reducing Laurie's trauma to a tragic prologue before shifting into a shallow critique of internet voyeurism and digital exploitation.
From a physical design perspective, this era completely abandons the cozy, flat, Midwestern suburbs of Haddonfield for completely different spatial grids. The Hilltop Academy, Halloween H20. The setting of Hillside Academy in Northern California is a brilliant piece of defensive architecture. It's an isolated, secure boarding school tucked away in the hills, accessible only through a massive, locked iron security gate. The production team shot at the Hillcrest Country Club and the Paramore Mansion in Los Angeles to create this sprawling, high-class compound. When the school goes on spring break, the architecture shifts from an active campus to an empty, echo-heavy stone fortress. The vast courtyards, narrow doorways, and subterranean dining halls turn the school into an elegant trap where help is miles down a winding mountain road. The digitized Myers house, Halloween Resurrection. For Resurrection, the franchise pulls a hard U-turn back to Haddonfield, but the original Myers house has been completely retrofitted. It's no longer just a decaying wooden split level, it's an interactive web set. The production design wires the house with miles of cable, static cameras, and streaming equipment. The spatial layout is explicitly designed to be viewed through multiple, tiny, perspective-shifting lenses, turning a classic haunted house into a surveillance funhouse.
The mechanics of the violence in this block show a major stylistic split. The polished slice, Halloween H20. In 1998, the studio was playing it safe to ensure a mainstream hit. The kills, like the ice skate throat slice or the dumbwaiter leg snap, are executed with clean, quick precision. There's a distinct lack of heavy splatter compared to H4 or H6. But the film makes up for it in pure physical impact during the final act, where Laurie uses a heavy fire axe to systematically hack away at Michael's momentum before cleanly decapitating him against a tree trunk. The reality TV butcher, Halloween Resurrection. In 2002, the violence turns cheap, quick, and mean. Michael stalks a cast of reality show archetypes through the wired Myers house. We get knives driven through closet doors, tripods used as impalement tools, and a brutal head twist. The visceral gimmick here is the Dangel vision, experiencing the kills through the low-resolution, frame-dropping POV of the victim's wearable cameras. It trades cinematic elegance for a grainy, digital reality show aesthetic.
Let's unpack the psychological engine of this dual timeline extension. The Fortress of Denial. In H20, Carrie Tate, Laurie, is a masterclass in functional trauma. She has a successful career and a son, but her internal map is entirely dominated by the shape. Every time she looks into a mirror or a dark window, she sees his mask. Her entire life is an elaborate psychological defense mechanism designed to keep her son safe and her past buried. The climax of H20 is one of the most empowering psychological pivots in horror. Laurie actively chooses to stop running, smashes the security gate control, locks herself inside the compound with her monster, and hunts him. The digital exploitation. Resurrection completely fractures that psychological victory. It opens with Laurie institutionalized at a psychiatric hospital, waiting for Michael to finish the job. After her tragic exit, the psychological weight shifts to the cast of Dangertainment, a group of fame-hungry college kids who willingly exploit a real-world mass murder site for internet clicks. The psychological horror transforms from an intimate family monster into a cynical commentary on a society that turns real-world tragedy into cheap streaming entertainment.
It's a wild, high-profile era that gave us one of the absolute highest emotional peaks in the franchise, followed immediately by what many consider its lowest structural collapse.
We went from an iconic axe swing to Busta Rhymes yelling kung fu noises at Michael Myers. Talk about a massive shift in the ledger.
It's an era defined by corporate identity crises. They built a beautiful, definitive emotional roof over the house in '98, and then ripped it right off in 2002 just to put a webcam on the chimney.
The files are unrolled, the webcams are live, and the postmodern era is officially on the slab.
All right, boys, let's run our standard forensic audit on this duology. Looking at H2O and Resurrection separately, what is the one structural design or thematic beat you absolutely loved? And what is the one devastating logic leak or production flaw you would completely redesign from the ground up? Shane, let's see your blueprints.
All right, let's pull up the drafting stools and look at these two projects. From a structural engineering standpoint, this era is a textbook case of corporate asset management. Dimension Films had $1 billion property, and they treated these two films like two completely different commercial renovations. One was a prestige, high-profile legacy build. The other was a cheap, trendy, fast turnaround commercial patch job. Let's break down the blueprints for H20 and Resurrection individually to see exactly how the physical layout worked and where it completely collapsed. Halloween H20, 20 years later. The blueprints and production grid. In 1998, the slasher landscape was completely dominated by the self-aware, fast-paced vocabulary of Scream. Dimension Films wanted that exact same shiny, high-octane energy for Michael Myers' 20th anniversary. They brought in director Steve Miner and writer Kevin Williamson to completely overhaul the infrastructure. The production grid shifted far away from the flat, dreary Midwestern gray of Utah or Illinois. The crew set up camp in Southern California, using the historic Paramore Mansion in Silver Lake and the Hillcrest Country Club to stitch together Hillside Academy. The result is a film that feels remarkably affluent, sunny, and polished, a stark contrast to any previous entry. The spatial layout of H20 relies heavily on the architecture of isolation within abundance. Hillside Academy is built like a Spanish colonial stone fortress nestled deep in the mountains. It has massive iron gates, winding roads, and heavy oak doors. The brilliant structural trick here is the spring break exodus. By clearing out 95% of the student body and staff for a camping trip, the architecture undergoes a massive functional shift. It transforms from a bustling, secure academic sanctuary into a cavernous, empty stone labyrinth. When Laurie, her son John, and their few remaining friends are locked inside, the vast courtyards and endless tile corridors work against them. Miner uses the wide 2.35:1 anamorphic frame to show how tiny the characters are within this sprawling compound. There are no neighbors, no passing cars, and no streetlights. Just an elegant, expensive trap where help is a 30-minute mountain drive away. Halloween, Resurrection, 2002. 4 years after H20 cleaned up at the box office, the studio wanted to capitalize on the rising early 2000s .com boom and the obsession with reality television like Big Brother. Rick Rosenthal, the director of Halloween 2, 1981, was brought back to helm a project that was designed from day one to be a trendy, high-concept, tech-driven cash-in. Instead of shooting on location in a real house, the production grid moved on to sound stages in Vancouver, British Columbia. They built a replica of the original Myers house from scratch, but with a massive catch. The entire set was explicitly designed to be a functional internet broadcast studio. Architecturally, Resurrection does something completely unique to the franchise layout. It turns the iconic Myers house into an interactive web set. The production design team completely retrofitted the decaying wooden split level, lining the walls with miles of coaxial cables, industrial studio lighting grids, and a massive array of static security cameras. Every single contestant on the Dangertainment stream is equipped with a head cam, a wearable headset camera with a built-in flashlight. This completely fractures the spatial geometry of the film. We are no longer watching a movie through a single, elegant cinematic lens. Instead, the screen is constantly broken up into multiple, low-resolution digital perspective feeds. It turns the house into a surveillance funhouse. The characters think the cameras are there to protect their broadcast and log their internet fame. But the infrastructure actually works to mask Michael's movements. He moves through the literal blind spots of the digital layout, transforming the birthplace of his evil into a weaponized, algorithm-driven slaughterhouse. Now that both structural layouts are on the board, let's deliver the final audit on this postmodern remodeling era. The one structural choice I absolutely loved. Without a doubt, it is the final structural layout of the chase and confrontation in Halloween H20. Once Laurie sends the kids away, the architecture of the film completely locks into place. When she smashes the electronic gate control with the fire axe, she isn't just trapping Michael inside. She is intentionally breaking her own safety perimeter to create a closed gladiator arena. The spatial tracking shots of Jamie Lee Curtis marching through those empty stone courtyards, axe in hand, screaming Michael's name, is pure cinematic architecture gold. It completely flips the power dynamic of the layout, turning the final girl into the structural hunter. The one logic leak or production flaw I would fix. I would completely demolish and rebuild the catastrophic mask continuity disaster in Halloween H20. Behind the scenes, this movie was an absolute nightmare of executive indecision. They went through 4 different Michael Myers masks during production, including a terrible, bulbous main mask, a completely different KNB backup mask, a Stan Winston redesign, and in one infamous scene in the school basement, a CGI digitally superimposed mask. When you watch H20, the face of your primary predator literally changes from shot to shot. In the basement scene with Charlie, Michael looks like a low-resolution video game character because they digitally tracked a fake mask over the actor's face in post-production. It is an absolute top-tier technical failure. If I were the project manager, I would have halted production on day 1, locked Harvey Weinstein out of the editing room, picked a single, high-quality, screen-accurate Winston mask, and stuck to the blueprint. You cannot build a terrifying legacy threat if his face keeps glitching like a broken Snapchat filter.
Oh man, that CGI mask in H20 is an absolute crime against humanity. It looks like a terrible Photoshop job floating in midair.
It completely breaks the psychological illusion of the physical boogeyman. But visually, Shane, your breakdown of the empty boarding school really highlights how much they weaponized that location.
It's an incredible set when they let it work. But all right, Marcus, the drafting board is warm. Step up to the morgue table and run the visceral audit on the kills across this studio-polished, tech-heavy duology.
All right, let's step up to the slab because the visceral ledger on this postmodern duology is a fascinating case of technical whiplash. We are tracking the franchise as it pivots from a highly sanitized, slick, late 90s studio blueprint directly into a cheap, experimental, early 2000s digital tech boom. Michael Myers goes from executing quick, sterile cuts designed for mainstream multiplexes to hacking up webcasters for an internet stream. Let's run the autopsy on H20 and resurrection individually. Halloween, H20, 20 years later. The visceral ledger, the Miramax sanitation. In 1998, Dimension Films and Miramax had a very specific mandate. Don't offend the mainstream audience. They wanted the box office returns of Scream, which meant the practical effects team had to deliver kills that were fast, precise, and light on heavy splatter. The violence here is all about clean studio polish. The ice skate slice. This is the most creative kill in the movie, and it heavily relies on environmental opportunism. Michael catches Charlie in the school kitchen, corners him, and uses a razor-sharp hockey skate to slice his throat open. Viscerally, it's incredibly clean. We see the quick glint of the blade and a controlled burst of blood. The dumbwaiter leg snap. This is where the physical trauma carries real structural weight. Sarah gets her leg trapped in a descending dumbwaiter shaft, and the elevator mechanism completely crushes her shin bone. You can physically feel the agonizing weight of that trap before Michael finishes the job. But let's be real, the ultimate visceral payoff of H20 isn't Michael's work, it's Laurie's. When she takes that fire axe, chops his hand, pins him between a crashed van and a tree, and cleanly takes his head off with a heavy swing, the physical impact is massive. It's a beautifully executed, practical decapitation that gave the audience total visceral closure. Halloween, Resurrection, 2002. The visceral ledger, the grainy reality grind. Then we hit 2002, and the visceral aesthetic takes a massive dive into trashy, low-resolution, found footage brutality. Gary J. Tunnicliffe handled the special effects, and he tried to inject some mean, jagged kills into a heavily compromised script. The camera tripod impalement. This is the standout technical kill of the movie. Michael takes a heavy aluminum studio camera tripod, sharpens the telescoping legs, and drives it clean through Bill's torso, pinning him to a doorframe. It perfectly marries the tech theme with old-school slasher physics. The skull crush and twist. Michael displays some of that classic hydraulic leverage here. He catches Jen on the stairs and uses his bare hands to violently twist her head 180 degrees until the cervical spine completely snaps. The gimmick here is Dangel vision. We see these kills happen through pixelated, low frame rate webcams worn by the actors. Viscerally, it makes the blood look like muddy digital noise, trading high-quality cinematic makeup for a grainy, hyper-edited reality TV aesthetic. And of course, we have to log the physical combat with Busta Rhymes, where Michael is hit with high-flying martial arts kicks and electrocuted with live television cables. It completely strips away the terrifying physics of the shape and turns him into a punching bag for pop culture. Now that the trauma data is logged, here is my official verdict on the postmodern era. The one visceral beat I absolutely loved. Across this entire block, nothing matches the pure, unadulterated physical impact of Laurie Strode's axe swing at the end of Halloween, H20. Even though the movie is light on gore, that final sequence delivers maximum visceral satisfaction. The camera stays wide, the tracking shot is smooth, and when that fire axe connects with the neck chassis, the execution is absolutely flawless. It's a legendary horror moment that felt 100% earned by the physical geometry of the chase. The one logic leak or FX flaw I would completely redesign. I would completely scrap and rebuild the entire prologue execution of Laurie Strode in Halloween, Resurrection. To take an iconic survivor like Laurie, trap her in a psych ward, and have her get outsmarted because she hesitates to pull a rope to drop Michael off a roof is a joke. But the real visceral insult is the kill itself. Michael stabs her in the back, lifts her up over the ledge, and drops her into the bushes. The fall looks incredibly cheap, the stunt work is rigid, and the physical trauma has zero impact. If you are going to kill off the ultimate horror matriarch, you don't do it with a lazy toss into some landscaping. I would redesign that sequence to be a brutal, agonizing, close-quarters struggle inside the sanitarium cage. Make it a heavy, desperate fight where she takes a piece of him with her, rather than a discardable, low-effort afterthought designed to get Jamie Lee Curtis off the payroll.
Amen to that. Dropping her into the bushes was an absolute insult to the physical history of that character.
It completely deflated the emotional and visceral investment of the entire franchise. But now that Marcus has cleared the slab, I'm stepping up. Let's look at the deep psychological damage of this survivor timeline.
The table is yours, Chloe. Run the diagnostic on the postmodern mind.
All right, boys, let's step up to the whiteboard and run a clinical diagnostic on this postmodern duology. From a psychological perspective, this era is a fascinating, deeply frustrating case study in the commodification of trauma. We are tracking a timeline that gives us the most mature, grounded, and textually accurate depiction of chronic PTSD in slasher history with H20, only for the studio to pivot 4 years later with Resurrection and turn that exact same trauma into a cynical, pixelated circus for internet voyeurs. Let's break down the psychological profiles of both films room by room. Halloween H20, 20 years later. In 1998, Kevin Williamson and Jamie Lee Curtis built a magnificent psychological foundation for Laurie Strode. This isn't the screaming teenager from 1978. This is a woman who has spent 2 decades living inside a state of permanent hypervigilance. Laurie has completely re-engineered her identity. She is now Carrie Tate, the headmistress of a prestigious academy, but her life is entirely governed by fear. She has a successful career, a loving boyfriend, and a teenage son, but her internal map is completely dominated by a phantom. She relies on alcohol to numb the panic attacks, and she keeps her son John under suffocating, claustrophobic emotional surveillance. Look at the way Steve Miner directs her perspective. Every time she looks into a dark window, a rearview mirror, or an empty hallway, her mind instantly projects the shape's white mask into the negative space. She is trapped in a perpetual loop of what if, waiting for the inevitable day her safety perimeter is breached. The true psychological masterpiece of H20 is Laurie's arc in the final act. For 20 years, she has been a passive victim running from a monster. But when Michael finally targets her son, something inside her psychological framework completely snaps. When she sends the kids past the gate, picks up that fire axe, and walks back into the compound, she undergoes a profound psychological transmutation. She sheds her fear and adopts the cold, methodical pathology of the hunter. She locks herself in with her monster because she realizes that the only way to destroy her invisible cage is to physically dismantle the man who built it. It is one of the most empowering, cathartically satisfying psychological resolutions in the entire horror genre. Halloween, Resurrection. And then we hit 2002, and the franchise commits the ultimate psychological sin. Halloween, Resurrection opens by completely undercutting Laurie's hard-won therapeutic victory, locking her away in a psychiatric ward where she plays cat and mouse with Michael one last time. Once she is tragically removed from the ledger, the psychological weight of the film completely shifts from personal trauma to societal voyeurism. We are introduced to Freddie Harris and Nora Winston, 2 cynical internet entrepreneurs running Dangertainment, a live-streamed reality show where college kids spend Halloween night inside the abandoned Myers house, hunting for clues about a real-world mass murderer. The psychological horror in Resurrection doesn't actually come from Michael Myers anymore. It comes from the desensitization of the digital age. The contestants entering the Myers house aren't driven by fear or survival. They are driven by the psychological addiction to fame and digital validation. They view a historic site of human slaughter as a playground, a resume builder, or a cheap way to pay off student loans. When Michael begins systematically executing them, the chat rooms on the stream treat it like a staged, scripted production. The viewers are completely insulated from the physical reality of death by a digital glass barrier. It's a deeply nihilistic psychological landscape where real human terror is reduced to a streaming algorithm, and the boogeyman is transformed from a cosmic force of nature into a content creator pulling numbers for a website. Now that the psychological profiles have been audited, here is my final verdict on this postmodern duology. The one thematic arc I absolutely loved. Across this block, my absolute favorite element was the deep, uncompromising emotional realism of Laurie's relationship with her son John in H20. Josh Hartnett and Jamie Lee Curtis have incredible screen chemistry that perfectly illustrates how generational trauma trickles down from parent to child. John is suffocated by his mother's paranoia. He wants to live a normal teenage life, but he is forced to carry the weight of an uncle he's never met. The friction between Laurie's desperate need to protect him and John's desperate need for autonomy gives H20 a rich, dramatic core that makes the third act stakes feel incredibly real. You aren't just rooting for a final girl to survive, you are rooting for a fractured family to finally find peace. The one psychological choice I would completely redesign. I would completely delete the entire Dangertainment reality TV plot from Halloween Resurrection and rebuild the movie around Sarah Moyer's internet network. The character of Sarah, played by Bianca Kylik, has a fascinating psychological hook that the movie completely wastes. She has an online relationship with a high school kid named Miles, who watches the entire massacre from his computer screen across the country. Instead of a trashy, low-rent Big Brother clone with Busta Rhymes, I would redesign Resurrection as an intimate, psychological, cyber-stalking thriller. Keep the focus on Sarah, trapped inside a completely unlit, automated Myers house with Michael, where her only connection to the outside world is Miles watching the static cameras from his bedroom, desperately typing instructions to help her navigate the dark layout. That shifts the psychology from a cheap, goofy comedy into a tense, isolated, technological nightmare of absolute helplessness.
Wow, Chloe. Redesigning Resurrection as a localized tech survival thriller with the static cameras actually guiding her? That is a brilliant script architecture fix.
Yeah, that actually sounds terrifying. It fixes the goofy tone completely and gives the digital theme some actual weight.
And with that, our forensic audit of the postmodern remodeling era is officially stamped into the archives. But the blueprint is about to get completely shredded. The studio looked at the absolute wreck of the Resurrection timeline, realized the house was totally beyond repair, and decided it was time to sell the land to a completely different developer.
All right, let's clear the table for a second because we need to pause the macrostructural analysis and do an immediate emergency engineering audit on one of the most structurally catastrophic, immersion-breaking logic leaks in the entire history of cinema. Busta Rhymes using discount karate to absolutely beat the brakes off Michael Myers. From a pure cinematic physics and architectural perspective, this scene doesn't just fail. It collapses the entire structural integrity of the shape as a load-bearing monster. Let's look at the actual blue line blueprints of why this completely breaks the franchise. For 24 years, the entire architecture of the Halloween franchise was built on a single, unyielding pillar. Michael Myers is an automated, immovable object. He doesn't feel pain, he doesn't react to human kinetics, and if you hit him with a car or shoot him 6 times, he tilts his head and keeps moving forward like a hydraulic crane. He represents a cosmic, unblinking void. But in 2002, the production team decided to throw that entire structural logic directly into a wood chipper. They write a sequence where Freddie Harris, Busta Rhymes, corners Michael in the burning Myers house and decides to channel his inner Bruce Lee. Freddie starts screaming, "Hi-ya!" and unleashes a flurry of spinning back kicks and open-hand strikes. And the absolute tragedy of the choreography is that Michael sells the hits. The shape, the biological manifestation of pure evil, is literally stumbling backward, flailing his arms, and crashing into cardboard boxes like a clumsy stuntman in a low-budget action flick. It completely rewires the physical mechanics of the monster. He is no longer a force of nature. He's just a big guy in a rubber mask who can get easily dismantled by a television producer doing basic cardio kickboxing. When Freddy yells, "Trick or treat, motherfucker," right before delivering a flying kick that knocks Michael out of a window and onto live electrical cables, the movie completely transforms from a horror film into a goofy, late 90s parody. You cannot spend 80 minutes trying to build an atmosphere of claustrophobic surveillance dread inside a historic slaughterhouse, only to finish the third act with a martial arts comedy routine. It is a total failure of tonal quality control. The studio completely compromised the asset just to give a pop culture cameo a hero moment, leaving the entire legacy of the character structurally compromised.
Oh man, Shane, thank you. I've been sitting here biting my tongue, watching Michael Myers get spinning back kicked into electrical wires while Busta makes generic kung fu noises. It's the ultimate Ledger penalty. It takes the boogeyman and turns him into a complete joke.
Psychologically, it completely kills the paranoia. How am I supposed to be terrified of an ancient, silent phantom of destruction when I know a guy with a webcam and a few hours of strip mall taekwondo can cleanly counter his entire offensive grid?
Exactly. It's the single biggest structural failure in the entire 2002 build. You don't build a monument of fear just to let it get spin-kicked into the drywall by a reality TV host. It completely ruined the foundation. And with that final structural failure properly audited, signed, and stamped into the ledger, we can officially close the books on this entire postmodern remodeling experiment. We went from the absolute highest premium architecture of H20 to a complete and total collapse of the foundation in 2002. The webcams are officially unplugged, the reality TV stream is dead, and the debris from that Kung Fu logic leak has been completely cleared off the slab.
Thank God. Pack up the bone saws and slide the trays back into the wall. That 2002 ledger was a messy, embarrassing piece of business, but the physical trauma data is logged and finalized.
We are crossing over into the ultimate demolition zone. We are throwing out the entire classic continuity, burning down the small-town suburban aesthetic, and stepping straight into the gritty, high-contrast, trailer park gothic vision of a rock star director. Get your denim jackets, your trench coats, and your white horses ready, because we are diving deep into the polarizing, brutal, heavy metal landscape of the Rob Zombie remake duology, Halloween 2007 and Halloween 2 2009.
The light of this world is riding away. Of this I am certain. The malice and beautiful decay I crave, I unearthed in her. As the flesh tears from the bone, I strike the match to burn. But the ash yields no warmth. Every instinct blinds me, leading me deeper into the dark. The labyrinth shifts, turning over and back again, leaving me more haunted than human when she is gone. When she is gone. Poison now.
All right, clear off the layout table and drop the drop lights low, because we are officially back on the municipal survey grid. Welcome back to the Scare Table, the Forensic Blueprint podcast presented by GhostfaceHorror.com, your primary digital hub for deep dive genre autopsies, independent horror journalism, and technical breakdowns of cinematic terror. Tonight, we are stepping into the ultimate demolition zone. The studio looked at the complete structural collapse of the 2002 Resurrection framework, realized the original continuity was beyond repair, and handed the entire asset over to a rockstar director with a heavy metal trailer park gothic vision. We are analyzing Rob Zombie's Halloween, 2007, and Halloween 2, 2009. Architecturally, this is a total industrial reconstruction project. Zombie doesn't just remodel the classic John Carpenter layout, he completely tears it down to the red clay and rebuilds it using high-contrast, hyper-violent, white trash realism. He trades the clean, quiet, middle-class suburbs of Illinois for a gritty, rust-covered, claustrophobic landscape of psychological rot and brute physical trauma.
Viscerally, the ledger for this duology is an absolute meat grinder. We are throwing out the sterile, polite studio cuts of the late 90s. Rob Zombie's Michael Myers isn't a silent, weightless phantom. He is a 6'9", 300-pound biological bulldozer played by Tyler Mane. The violence here is all about mass and hydraulic leverage. When this Michael Myers hits a door, the frame splinters. When he drives a knife into a victim, you hear the agonizing crunch of bone and the physical exhaustion of the struggle. It is a wet, heavy, devastating ledger that treats the human body like cheap drywall.
And psychologically, we are running a clinical diagnostic on a completely different breed of monster. Zombie completely strips away the blank void thesis from 1978 and replaces it with a deeply uncomfortable case study in generational psychopathy. We spend the first 45 minutes of the 2007 film analyzing the domestic war zone of Michael's childhood home, tracing the exact neurological and environmental triggers that create an apex predator. And by the time we hit Halloween 2 in 2009, the movie transforms into a surreal, agonizing study of acute PTSD, tracking how Laurie Strode's mind completely disintegrates under the weight of her survival. It's a polarized, heavy metal landscape, and the table is officially open.
From a spatial engineering standpoint, Zombie completely alters the geography of Haddonfield. Look at the Myers house in the first act of the 2007 remake. It isn't a tidy, clean suburban home with an empty dark hallway. It is a cluttered, claustrophobic, dirty environment filled with empty beer cans, peeling wallpaper, and screaming voices. The architecture itself breeds paranoia. There are no clean sight lines. Everything is obscured by shadows, filth, and domestic debris. Smith's Grove is transformed from a quiet, clinical county hospital into a massive, imposing concrete fortress of brutalist architecture. The walls are thick, stained concrete, the corridors are cavernous, and the holding cells look like subterranean zoo cages. Zombie uses this spatial scale to emphasize Michael's physical containment and the absolute inevitability of the structural failure when that containment grid finally breaches.
Yeah, and when that breach happens, he doesn't just walk out the front door like a ghost. He literally dismantles the security guards like he's clearing out old plumbing.
But structurally, Shane, don't you think giving that environment so much texture actually strips away the cosmic mystery? In 1978, the Myers house was scary because it was any house on a normal street. Here, it looks like a cursed object from the very first frame.
It absolutely shifts the thesis, Chloe. It changes it from evil can hide anywhere to this specific environment is a factory that manufactures monsters. It's a completely different blueprint, but under Zombie's direction, the concrete and rust feel incredibly oppressive.
Let's get down on the floor and look at the physical trauma data, because Tyler Mane's Michael Myers completely redefines slasher physics. The bathroom stalls beatdown, Joe Grizzly. This is the ultimate test of mass versus space. Michael corners an oversized truck driver in a cramped metal bathroom stall. The choreography is brutal because it's entirely about claustrophobic levering. You feel every single impact as Ken Foree gets slammed against the stainless steel partitions. The knife strokes aren't quick slashes. They are heavy, deep, industrial punctures. The wall slam extravaganza, Nurse Daniels. In the 2009 sequel, the violence becomes even more jagged and experimental. The opening dream sequence hospital sequence features a kill where Michael repeatedly lifts a nurse and drives her into the floor and walls. The sound design is dry and concussive. No cinematic musical swells, just the rhythmic, sickening thud of human tissue hitting load-bearing masonry.
The sound design in H2 is incredibly mean, Marcus. It sounds less like a horror movie and more like a car crash happening in slow motion.
Viscerally, it's effective, but it's almost entirely devoid of suspense. It replaces the agonizing tension of the chase with the immediate shock of an assault. Psychologically, it exhausts the viewer rather than terrifying them.
That's because it's a street fight, Chloe. This Michael Myers doesn't play cat and mouse. He's an eviction notice in a mechanic's jumpsuit. I love the sheer kinetic weight of it.
Let's move the lights over to the psychiatric board, because Halloween 2, 2009, is where Zombie pulls off his most radical psychological experiment. Zombie introduces a surrealist, subjective internal framework for Michael, manifested as visions of his mother, Sherry Moon Zombie, clad in white leading a white stallion. Clinically, this is an exploration of a severe, regressive childhood schizophrenia. Michael isn't operating on cosmic instinct anymore. He is driven by a fractured maternal delusion that commands him to reunite the family. Look at Scout Taylor Compton's Laurie Strode in the second film. She is a total psychological wreck. She is living in a rural farmhouse. Her room is a chaotic mess of therapy books and punk rock posters, and her panic attacks are violent and physical. Zombie brilliantly shows that surviving a slasher movie doesn't make you a stoic hero. It leaves you with severe, crippling, unmedicated trauma that slowly erodes your entire personality until you start absorbing the very pathology of the monster who hunted you.
The way she starts wearing the flannel shirt and mirroring Michael's internal visual cues at the end of H2 is a really dark piece of character architecture. It implies the infection is hereditary.
Yeah, it's a trip, but let's be real. Those white horse sequences drag the pacing of the movie straight into a ditch. I want to see Michael Myers hunting people in the dark, not a slow-motion avant-garde music video starring the director's wife.
Of course you'd say that, Marcus. You have the attention span of a circular saw. Those sequences are trying to give us a window into a completely unmapped psychological void. It's a polarizing choice, but it's the only part of the sequel that feels genuinely experimental.
The initial surveys are mapped, the trauma ledger is stamped, and the psychiatric profiles are live on the board. Let's set the standard lines for this Rob Zombie audit. Chloe, hit us with the opening prompt.
All right, boys, let's run the diagnostic. Given how radically Rob Zombie altered the origin story in the 2007 film, do you think grounding Michael's evil in a broken, abusive childhood home makes him more terrifying as a modern, real-world threat? Or does it completely destroy the cosmic, unexplained magic that made the 1978 original work? Marcus, take the floor first.
Oh, you know I've got thoughts on this, Chloe. And I'm about to drop a heavy steel wrench right on your psychological board. To answer your prompt, grounding Michael in a white trash war zone completely destroys the cosmic boogeyman magic. Don't get me wrong, from a pure kinetic, muscle-bound standpoint, I love Tyler Mane as a biological bulldozer. But the minute you show me little 10-year-old Michael crying into a papier-mâché mask because his stepdad is shouting about a TV dinner, you've fundamentally broken the asset. In 1978, Michael Myers was terrifying because there was no logic leak. He came from a beautiful, clean, normal suburban home. He had a nice family. And then for absolutely no reason at all, he picked up a chef's knife and became a cosmic void. That is a structural nightmare because it means evil can just manifest anywhere without an explanation. Rob Zombie's 2007 blueprint turns Michael into a completely predictable science experiment. It's basically slasher economics 101. If you put a kid in an abusive trailer park, add an unstable mother, and mix in some animal torture, you get a mass murderer. That's not cosmic terror, Chloe. That's just a tragic episode of an investigative true crime show. By the time he grows up into a giant, he's not the shape anymore. He's just a really angry power lifter who needs a serious grievance counselor.
Wow, Marcus delivering a lecture on narrative logic? Check the temperature in the room, folks, because hell just froze over on the slab.
Honestly, I'm shocked. I thought you'd be totally on board with the trailer park prologue just because it gave you an excuse to watch 3 people get brutally dismantled before the opening credits even rolled.
Hey, I can appreciate a flawless practical throat slash and care about structural integrity at the same time. I contain multitudes, all right? But Shane, you look at the spatial layout of that kid's section. Does the origin story actually hold up for you architecturally, or does it stall out?
It completely stalls out the pacing grid, Marcus, and here is why. It's a massive over-engineering error. Look at the structural blueprint of a standard slasher prologue. Its entire function is to set a foundational baseline of tension, establish the mechanical rules of the monster, and get the hell out of the way so the main narrative layout can assemble. John Carpenter did it in exactly 4 minutes in 1978. A single tracking shot, a clown mask, a kitchen knife, and boom, the foundation is set, and we jump 21 years into the future. Rob Zombie spends 45 minutes on the framing layout of Michael's childhood. 45 minutes! That is almost half the runtime of the original film, dedicated entirely to pouring concrete for a foundation we already know is cracked. By the time Danny Trejo shows up as the sympathetic sanitarium guard, and don't get me started on using Machete himself as a structural load-bearing pillar for Michael's humanity, the movie has completely shifted gears from a claustrophobic horror piece into a bleak biographical drama. And the real logic leak here is that Zombie's spatial architecture doesn't match the threat. He tries to build this massive, operatic mythos around a kid who wears a trash bag and kills a school bully with a branch. It takes away all the claustrophobic dread of the quiet suburban streets because we're trapped in a perpetual loop of shouting, domestic debris, and bad choices. If you spend that much time explaining the wiring of the house, the audience isn't scared when the lights finally go out. They're just waiting for the electrician to finish the job. It completely compromises the pacing asset, leaving the entire second act in Haddonfield scrambling to fit the classic narrative geometry into a frame that's already warped.
Boom. Thank you. The structural engineer has spoken. 45 minutes of a kid yelling in a dirty kitchen is 45 minutes I could have spent watching an industrial kitchen knife being driven through a load-bearing wall.
You two are unbelievable. You're evaluating a deeply traumatic psychological character study like it's a poorly poured concrete driveway. Shane, you're completely ignoring what that 45-minute build does to the psychological perimeter of the audience.
Oh boy, here comes the psychiatric defense grid. Grab your notebook, Shane. Chloe's about to analyze our feelings about white trash gothic.
The floor is yours, Chloe. Run the diagnostic on why we're wrong.
You two are looking at the blueprints completely upside down. You're treating Michael Myers like he's a standardized plumbing installation instead of a living, breathing psychological infection. To answer my own prompt, grounding Michael in that domestic war zone doesn't destroy the horror. It updates the diagnosis for 2007. In 1978, the fear of the blank slate worked because suburban America was obsessed with the illusion of perfect safety. But by the late 2000s, our collective cultural anxiety shifted. We became terrified of what happens when the social safety net completely drops out. Zombie's 45-minute prologue is a brutal, unblinking look at generational trauma. The real psychological horror here isn't just that Michael kills. It's that his entire environment is a factory designed to crush empathy. When you see him sitting in that sterile, brutalist Smith's Grove cell, slowly burying his face behind walls of handmade papier-mâché masks, it's a brilliant visual metaphor for profound dissociation. He is literally constructing a physical barrier between his fractured psyche and a world that offers him zero therapeutic resolution. And Marcus, you say it makes him predictable? It actually makes him way more tragic, which makes the violence in the second half twice as distressing. He's not a cosmic ghost anymore. He's an unstoppable, unmedicated byproduct of a broken system. When he finally returns to Haddonfield, he's like a physical manifestation of repressed societal rot, coming back to tear down the tidy suburban walls that tried to ignore him.
A tragic science project? Chloe, the guy is 6'9" and uses a metal pipe like a baseball bat. I don't want to feel bad for the apex predator. I want to watch him do heavy kinetic demolition work.
Actually, Chloe, from a pure spatial layout perspective, your mask analogy is pretty structurally sound. The masks are his architecture. But it still creates a massive narrative drag. It turns the boogeyman into a clinical case file, and you can't outrun a case file. You just audit it.
Exactly. And Halloween 2 takes that audit even further by showing Laurie's mental layout completely shattering from the trauma. But I know you two just want to talk about the body count, so let's hand the tools back to Marcus.
All right, Marcus, the drafting board is warm and the kinetic grid is live. Step up to the morgue table and give us your visceral damage report on the actual mechanical execution of these Rob Zombie kills.
Oh, it is officially time to grease the gears and look at some absolute hydraulic carnage. If you're over at ghostfacehorror.com looking at our classic slasher kill sheets, you need to throw out the old metrics for this one. Rob Zombie's kinetic layout isn't about artistic, stealthy throat slits. It is about sheer physical displacement and blunt force trauma. Let's crack open the operational diagnostic on how Tyler Mane executes this blueprint. When John Carpenter staged the original kills, he relied heavily on shadow placement, off-screen sound cues, and the illusion of violence. Michael would pin a guy to a wall with a knife, but the camera focused on the victim's swinging legs. It was elegant, polite, and clean. Rob Zombie completely guts that framework. He rigs his cinematography with a frantic, handheld, documentary-style chaos that forces the lens right into the wet, sloppy center of the assault. The mechanical tension doesn't come from wondering where Michael is hiding. It comes from the terrifying realization that even if you see him coming, you do not possess the physical horsepower to stop a 300-pound biological freight train. There is a massive structural evolution between the two builds. The 2007 remake uses a bold, wet, high-contrast practical effects layout where the blood is thick and cinematic. But by the time we hit the 2009 sequel, Halloween 2, the carnage mechanics turn completely jagged and industrial. The kills in the sequel aren't designed to look cool or theatrical. They are engineered to look agonizing, exhausting, and physically messy. Michael stays on top of his victims, stabbing them repeatedly long after the theatrical point of death, turning a standard horror trope into an ugly, rhythmic exercise in pure mechanical destruction. Let's run the stress test on the two most structurally significant sequences in this duology. The one sequence that absolutely slapped. The absolute gold standard of this entire kinetic build is the bathroom stall execution of Joe Grizzly in the 2007 remake. This sequence is a masterclass in claustrophobic spatial engineering. You take Ken Foree, a massive, legendary horror icon who actually looks like he could defend himself, and lock him in a cramped, stainless steel commercial bathroom stall with Tyler Mane. The choreography here is flawless because it understands leverage. When Michael slams Joe Grizzly against those metal partitions, you don't just hear a movie sound effect, you feel the structural vibration of the frame bending. The struggle is desperate, sweaty, and completely devoid of slasher elegance. Michael doesn't just casually slice him, he has to physically overpower a giant, making the final, deep, tactical plunge of that massive chef's knife feel incredibly heavy, hard-earned, and devastatingly permanent. The one gag that completely bottomed out. The sequence that absolutely leaked oil for me was the strip club dressing room slaughter in the 2009 sequel. Look, I love an aggressive practical rig, but Zombie completely over-engineered the chaos here. Michael tracks down Laurie's co-worker, Maya, into a crowded, dimly lit backstage area. The kill features Michael lifting a couch with one hand and repeatedly plunging a knife into a victim. But the camera work is so frantically shaky and the editing cuts are so rapid that the actual mechanical craftsmanship of the FX team gets completely buried in the screen glitch. It stops looking like a heavy, kinetic assault and starts looking like a broken blender spinning in a dark room. You can't appreciate the visceral damage if the director is violently shaking the lens like he's trying to wake up a stalled engine.
Man, you aren't kidding about the camera shake in H2, Marcus. It's like the cinematographer was riding a jackhammer during the entire third act layout.
But Marcus, that's exactly the psychological point. The camera shake isn't a glitch. It's a visual manifestation of a panic attack. It's designed to make you feel as disoriented and hyperventilating as the victims.
I don't care about the camera's panic attack, Chloe. I want to see the knife hit the bone. If I wanted to look at blurry, vibrating shapes in the dark, I'd take my glasses off and stare at a ceiling fan.
All right, before Marcus completely breaks our audio gear trying to demonstrate a bathroom stall slam, let's hand the diagnostic files over to Chloe. Run the psychological audit on how Laurie Strode's mind completely disintegrates under this heavy metal load.
All right, you two cavemen, you can put your hammers down for a minute because we need to talk about the real bleeding heart of this duology. From a clinical perspective, what Rob Zombie does to the character layout of Laurie Strode in Halloween 2 is one of the most radical, agonizing psychological deconstructions in the entire history of the slasher genre. Let's pull up the mental health files and audit how a survivor's mind actually fractures under this kind of load. In almost every other slasher sequel in existence, the final girl magically transforms into an action hero. She gets a haircut, buys a shotgun, and completely masters her fear. It's a clean, comforting Hollywood blueprint that tells the audience, don't worry, the bad thing is over and she's completely fine now. Rob Zombie looks at that blueprint and completely shreds it. He sets the 2009 film 1 year later, and Scout Taylor Compton's Laurie Strode is a total, vibrating psychiatric wreck. She is living in a cramped, isolated rural farmhouse with Brackett and Annie. Her room is a chaotic, defensive fortress of therapy books, punk rock posters, and unwashed clothes. And her psyche is completely held together by scotch tape and prescription meds. Zombie texturizes her PTSD so vividly that you can practically smell the stale sweat and panic attacks coming off the screen. She's a hero. She is a profoundly damaged human being trapped in a loop of secondary survival guilt. But the real architectural stroke of genius, and the thing that makes the sequel deeply distressing, is the psychological mirroring between Laurie and Michael. As the film progresses, Laurie's mental perimeter doesn't just decay, it actively begins to absorb the pathology of the monster who hunted her. Because Zombie established that Michael's violence is a hereditary, environmental infection, we watch that same virus mutate inside Laurie. She starts having severe, waking dissociative episodes. Her panic attacks manifest as violent, screaming outbursts that terrify her friends. By the time she's wearing that oversized, grungy flannel shirt and staring blankly into space, she isn't just running the shape anymore. She is structurally transforming into it. The film sets a devastating psychological trap. Michael doesn't even need to kill Laurie to destroy her. His mere existence has already overwritten her identity, turning her into the final piece of his family's legacy of rot. Now that the psychiatric grid is live on the board, let's deliver the final thematic ledger on how this psychological experiment holds up. The one psychological choice I absolutely loved. The element that absolutely elevates Halloween 2 into a masterpiece of psychological horror is the brutal realism of the survivor therapy dynamics. There is an incredibly raw, heartbreaking sequence where Laurie is sitting in her therapist's office, completely breaking down, screaming about how she can still hear the sound of the knife and the smell of the blood, while her friends outside are just trying to plan a normal Halloween party. Zombie captures the absolute isolation of profound trauma better than almost any filmmaker alive. He shows the devastating disconnect between a survivor who is frozen in the exact moment of her assault and a well-meaning world that is aggressively demanding that she just move on and get over it. It's an uncomfortable, non-stylized diagnostic of mental illness that makes the film feel heavy, real, and deeply empathetic. The one character deficit that weakened the build. The absolute structural disaster of this entire psychological deck is the complete and total assassination of Dr. Sam Loomis. I love Malcolm McDowell, but the choice to turn Loomis into a greedy, cynical, media whore capitalist who is exploiting Michael's body count to sell a trashy true crime book is a massive logic leak in the narrative design. In the original framework, Loomis was the ultimate structural counterweight to Michael. He was the modern-day Van Helsing, the obsessive, broken guardian who understood the cosmic weight of the evil they were dealing with. By stripping away his clinical obsession and turning him into a narcissistic celebrity hack, the script removes the narrative's moral compass. It leaves the entire middle section of the film feeling incredibly mean-spirited and cynical, forcing us to watch a legendary character act like a cheap tabloid reporter until the script remembers he needs to show up at the end to get dismantled.
Spot on, Chloe. Turning Loomis into a sleazy book salesman completely compromises the structural balance of the hunt. It takes away the one guy who actually understood the mechanics of the boogeyman and turns him into a plot device.
Yeah, it made me want to see Michael squeeze his skull even faster. Though I gotta admit, Chloe, you're totally right about Laurie's breakdown in the sequel. It's hard to watch, but man, when she's screaming in that hospital hallucination at the beginning, that is a raw, terrifying standard of acting.
Exactly. It's painful because it's supposed to be painful. It treats the aftermath of a slasher movie like an actual emergency room data sheet instead of a fun popcorn ride.
All right, put your safety glasses on and let's look at the actual construction yard behind these movies. If you think the on-screen layout of a Rob Zombie film is chaotic, the behind-the-scenes engineering log is a total industrial accidents report. Let's pull the curtain back and audit the literal blood, sweat, and studio interference that built this duology. First off, you have to look at the structural tension between the director and the money. Rob Zombie was brought in by Dimension Films, specifically the Weinstein brothers, who were notorious for micromanaging horror assets until the original blueprints were completely unrecognizable. Zombie has stated on record that making the 2007 film was a miserable, high-stress assembly line because the studio was constantly demanding he match the classic Carpenter framework while simultaneously telling him to make it completely different. To survive that kind of corporate panopticon, Zombie surrounded himself with a highly specialized, loyal crew deck. The visual engineer, cinematographer Phil Parmit shot the 2007 film with a gritty, naturalistic, handheld aesthetic, but for the 2009 sequel, Brandon Tross took over the camera rigging. Tross shot Halloween 2 on 16mm film stock, intentionally pushing the grain and pulling the color out to give it that dirty, unwashed, oil-stained look that Marcus loves so much. The Carnage mechanics. Wayne Toth handled the special makeup effects for both films. Toth is the mad scientist who engineered the evolution of Michael's mask. In the 2007 remake, it starts clean, decays over 17 years, and by 2009, it's a rotted, half-torn piece of visceral leather that literally mirrors Michael's splitting psyche. Now look at how Zombie populated the municipal grid of Haddonfield. He didn't just hire random Hollywood models, he built a living museum of genre history. You've got William Forsythe playing the abusive stepfather, Dee Wallace as Laurie's adoptive mother, Danny Trejo running security at Smith's Grove, and even Ken Foree from the original Dawn of the Dead getting slammed into that bathroom partition. It's an incredible casting grid that shows an immense respect for the old-school foundations of horror cinema. But we cannot run an honest audit on this cast deck without talking about the ultimate piece of franchise heritage salvage, the return of Danielle Harris. For anyone who knows their Haddonfield municipal history, Danielle Harris is the foundation of the middle-era sequels. She played Jamie Lloyd, Michael's telepathically linked niece, in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, 1988, and Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, 1989, when she was just a kid. She was the emotional core of that entire timeline before the studio completely botched the continuity in Part 6. When Zombie was drafting the 2007 remake, he made a brilliant structural choice. He didn't bring her back as a cheap background Easter egg cameo. He cast her right into the heavy load-bearing role of Annie Brackett, Sheriff Brackett's daughter and Laurie's best friend. And let me tell you, Danielle Harris didn't just show up to collect a legacy check, she brought the absolute house down. In the 2007 film, her survival scene where Michael attacks her in the Brackett home is a devastatingly brutal practical setup. But it's Halloween 2, 2009, where her presence completely shifts the weight of the film. In the 2009 sequel, Annie is the stable, mature counterweight to Laurie's erratic psychological decay. She is trying to be the adult in the house, managing the domestic perimeter while dealing with her own repressed trauma from the first movie. When Michael finally breaches the farmhouse while Sheriff Brackett is out on patrol, the sequence where he corners Annie is one of the most agonizingly mean-spirited things Rob Zombie has ever engineered. It is a slow, wet, heavy practical assault that ends with Annie covered in blood on the bathroom floor. When Brad Dourif, who plays Sheriff Brackett, comes home and finds his actual daughter dead, man, that is a masterclass in raw, human devastation. Dourif's performance in that scene is so heartbreaking it completely transcends the slasher genre. And it only hits that hard because Danielle Harris spent 2 entire movies building Annie into a living, breathing, deeply empathetic human being. It's the ultimate validation of hiring a seasoned genre veteran to do the heavy lifting.
Oh man, don't remind me of that Brackett scene, Shane. Watching Chucky himself break down crying over his daughter's body, that was a heavy piece of damage. Danielle Harris sold that kill so well, it actually made me feel bad for enjoying the rest of the body count.
It's the most devastating scene in the entire duology, Marcus, because it's the one time the violence has absolute, permanent emotional consequences. Danielle Harris proved exactly why she is horror royalty. She gave that movie its actual soul.
She really did. It's a flawless piece of casting architecture in a pair of movies that are absolutely bursting at the seams with texture. But all right, team, we've audited the crew, we've logged the cast, and the Rob Zombie blueprints are officially stamped, archived, and filed away on the shelf.
And that is the final entry in the Rob Zombie log. Look, love it or hate it, you have to respect the sheer industrial force of what he did. He took a classic, untouchable blueprint, threw out the safety manuals, and built something completely unique out of grease, blood, and absolute psychological misery. But as of right now, this specific chapter of the Halloween saga is officially closed. The concrete has cured, the structural audit is stamped, and the remake timeline has officially run out of track. It is time for us to clear the drafting stools and move on to the next major infrastructure shift. We are packing up our gear and moving straight into the David Gordon Green Blumhouse era. We're erasing 40 years of convoluted studio continuity, retconning everything but the 1978 original, and analyzing what happens when you build a modern, high-tech fortress around an aging, traumatized final girl. Marcus, get your mechanics gloves ready, because the 2018 reclamation project is up next on the municipal grid.
Oh, now we're talking. Back to the classic mask, back to the clean hunting geometry, and we get a 40-year-older Michael Myers who is somehow even meaner. Let's see how that new framework handles under load.
It's a massive tonal shift from the grit we just covered, shifting from a tragic case study right back into a sleek, calculated clinical hunt. The psychiatric board is officially reset.
The lines are drawn, the table is cleared, and the next blueprint is already rolling out. We'll see you all for the 2018 reboot right after this.
The air is turning cold. I can feel it coming in the damp of the night. I've been waiting for this moment all my life. Oh, Lord. Well, if you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand. I've seen your face in the camera lens before, my friend, but I don't know if you know who I am. Well, I was there in the shadows, and I saw what you did. I saw it with my own two hollow eyes.
Well, I remember the way the light left. How could I ever forget the first time, the last time we ever met in the basement? But I know the reason why you keep your silence up. No, you don't fool me. The hurt doesn't show, but the rot still grows. It's no stranger to you or me. The archives are waiting, the blade is ready. I've been watching you sleep, I've been counting your breath. I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Oh Lord, can you feel it coming? The shadows are moving and they're looking for you. Oh Lord. The road isn't real. I remember everything stays in the dark.
All right, team. Lock the vault doors and check your feeds because we are officially stepping into the modern grid. Welcome back to the Scare Table, your analytical genre workshop presented by GhostfaceHorror.com. Tonight, we are closing out our massive franchise audit by diving straight into the concrete and steel of the Blumhouse trilogy: Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills 2021, and Halloween Ends 2022. Architecturally, director David Gordon Green and writer Danny McBride executed a complete legacy reclamation and retcon infrastructure. They literally drove a bulldozer right through 40 years of convoluted studio sequels, temporal logic leaks, and Cult of Thorn magic. They erased everything except John Carpenter's original 1978 foundation. The blueprint here is built on a simple question. What happens if you take a vintage 1970s suburban nightmare, let it ferment in a dark room for 40 years, and then surround it with modern security perimeters, drone tech, and severe multi-generational trauma?
And viscerally, this trilogy turns the dial from the raw, slow street fight kinetics of the Rob Zombie era into a sleek, high-velocity industrial slaughter. James Jude Courtney steps into the coveralls as Michael Myers, and he moves like an apex predator that has been finely tuned in a lab. He is efficient, silent, and fast. The kills in this modern build are incredibly sharp, featuring flawless practical head stomps, jaw-dropping kitchen knife displays, and a sheer volume of carnage that completely shatters the franchise record books. It's a beautifully optimized layout of modern splatter engineering.
But psychologically, this is where the trilogy builds its most fascinating, polarized framework. We are running a 3-part diagnostic on the infection of fear. It starts as a razor-sharp study of 3 generations of Strode women, Laurie, Karen, and Allison, and how Laurie's unhealed 1978 trauma has functionally built a survivalist prison around her family. Then, it scales up into an ugly, fascinating look at mass hysteria and mob mentality in Kills. And finally, it takes a massive structural risk in Ends by exploring how a community's collective rot can literally breed a copycat monster in the shadows. The modern grid is live, and the stools are pulled up.
From a spatial layout perspective, the 2018 film is entirely defined by the Laurie Strode survival compound. Laurie's house isn't a suburban home anymore. It is a fortified geometric bunker hidden deep in the woods. You got a heavy-duty electric gate, security spotlights, a network of perimeter cameras, and a hidden subterranean safe room buried beneath a moving kitchen island. because the architecture is a literal physical manifestation of Laurie's mind. It's entirely out of paranoia, designed to keep the outside world out, but ultimately turning into the perfect cage to trap the monster inside. Look at how the spatial tension shifts across the three films. We move from the highly controlled, mechanical traps of the compound into the chaotic, sprawling labyrinth of the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital in Kills, and finally into the quiet, isolated, rusted-out geometry of a local junkyard in Ends. It is a complete spatial decay, moving from an over-engineered fortress down to a literal scrap heap of society.
Yeah, and that kitchen island trap in 2018 was pure poetry, Shane. You build a literal cage inside your basement, flip the switch, and watch the whole framework turn into an automated incinerator. That is top-tier structural engineering.
But Shane, look at how that architecture backfires. By building a fortress to keep Michael out, she inadvertently taught her daughter Karen to grow up inside a bunker. The space itself became a tool of emotional abuse before Michael ever even escaped his transport bus.
That is the exact brilliance of the design, Chloe. The architecture is doing the psychological heavy lifting before a single drop of blood is spilled.
Let's look at the physical trauma data on this James Jude Courtney build, because this Michael Myers operates with absolute fluid efficiency. He doesn't waste energy, and his craftsmanship is flawless. The back and forth suburban walk, 2018. This is one of the greatest long takes in modern horror history. The camera tracks Michael as he casually glides through a normal Haddonfield neighborhood on Halloween night. He walks into one house, grabs a hammer, obliterates a woman, swaps it for a kitchen knife in the next kitchen, and keeps moving. The physics here are terrifying because it's so casual. It's a rhythmic, seamless production line of death. The firefighter massacre, Kills. This is the ultimate peak of Michael's kinetic power. He steps out of a burning house and systematically dismantles an entire squad of first responders using their own industrial rescue tools. When he rams a Halligan bar through a shield or swings a circular saw, the choreography is incredibly clean, brutal, and fast. It's the highest octane slaughter in the entire 48-year ledger.
The firefighter sequence is a massive piece of action architecture, Marcus. But don't you think Kills over-allocates its budget on the body count while letting the structural integrity of the plot completely slide?
Oh, it absolutely leaks oil, Shane. It turns the entire town into an undifferentiated pile of meat just to inflate the metrics. By the time he's wiping out a vigilante mob in slow motion, it feels less like a horror film and more like a comic book slasher fantasy.
Hey, you two can debate the philosophy all day long, but watching Michael stomp Dr. Sartain's head into an actual, uncensored puddle of mush, like a ripe pumpkin, that is the kind of high-impact practical FX work that keeps the lights on at ghostfacehorror.com.
Let's move over to the psychiatric board, because we have to talk about the highly controversial, deeply polarizing architecture of Halloween Ends, 2022. Ends completely shifts the focus away from Michael Myers for the first two acts and introduces Corey Cunningham, Rohan Campbell. Clinically, this is an exploration of a toxic community infection. Corey accidentally causes a tragic accident involving a child he's babysitting, and Haddonfield turns him into a pariah. The movie shows that a town's relentless, bullying paranoia can create the exact monster they are terrified of. When Corey finds a weakened, rotted Michael living like a parasite in the municipal sewer grid, they don't just fight, they form a bizarre, psychic partnership. Corey begins mirroring Michael's movements, stealing his mask, and executing his own personal revenge ledger against the town. It's a fascinating, dark study of how evil isn't just a physical body, it's a contagious psychological meme that can find a new host when the old one starts to decay.
It's an incredibly risky piece of narrative engineering, Chloe. But from a structural standpoint, introducing a brand new main character in the final chapter of a trilogy feels like trying to install a completely different plumbing system when the house is already 90% built.
Thank you, Shane. I didn't tune into the grand finale of a 40-year rivalry to watch a scrawny kid in a motorcycle jacket do a bootleg Michael Myers impression. I wanted the heavyweights in the center ring, not a sideshow apprentice.
I knew you two would hate it. You have absolutely no patience for an experimental psychological autopsy. Enns is trying to say that the boogeyman is an idea. If you just kill the old man in the mask without curing the town's underlying sickness, the infection just finds a fresh piece of clay to mold.
The modern blueprints are mapped, the high-velocity ledger is logged, and the psychiatric profiles are active on the board. Let's set the standard lines for this final modern audit. Chloe, kick off the floor with the opening prompt.
All right, boys, let's run the stress test. Given how much Halloween Kills amplified the body count to absolute record-breaking heights, do you think turning Michael into an invincible, superhuman tank who can take down an entire town mob makes him a better slasher? Or did Halloween Ends make the right move by showing him as a weak, rotted old man who can barely hold his own knife? Shane, you're up first.
All right, let's lay this out on the drafting table. From a pure structural engineering perspective, the Blumhouse trilogy suffers from a massive structural integrity defect right between parts 2 and 3. If you look at the blueprinted trajectory of Halloween Kills, director David Gordon Green builds Michael up into an absolute mythic skyscraper. He survives a burning basement, liquidates a squad of firefighters, and then takes an absolute beating from the Haddonfield mob, getting shot, stabbed, and beaten with a 2x4, only to stand right back up and wipe out the entire vigilante perimeter in single file. The film ends on a thesis statement delivered by Laurie herself. The more he kills, the more he transcends into something else. They engineered him to be an invincible, supernatural force of nature. And then we roll into Halloween Ends, and it feels like the writers realized they built a structure so tall, they didn't know how to clean the windows. So what do? They pull a massive bait and switch. They jump 4 years into the future, and suddenly this mythic skyscraper is living in a concrete storm drain, so physically decrepit and rotted out that a scrawny, traumatized 20-year-old kid can stroll in, tackle him, and wrestle his mask away. That is a catastrophic failure of load-bearing continuity, Marcus. You cannot spend an entire movie telling the audience that this monster is a transcendent, immortal concept, and then open the very next chapter by treating him like a rusted-out engine block that won't turn over. It completely breaks the suspension of disbelief because the mechanics of the monster aren't consistent. They turned the apex predator into an absolute afterthought in his own finale, just to make room for a new plumbing system nobody asked for.
Preach, Shane, preach! He went from a 5-star tank to a guy who needs a walker in the span of a single commercial break. It's like buying a high-performance muscle car and finding out it's got a lawnmower engine under the hood.
Oh, you two are so blinded by your love for invincible monsters that you're completely missing the brilliant clinical tragedy of Ends. Shane, you're looking at his physical mass, but you're completely ignoring the energetic layout of the character.
Energetic layout? Chloe, the guy got beaten up by a kid named Corey. A guy named Corey stole his lunch money. I don't need a psychiatric report to know that completely leaks oil.
All right, Chloe, the floor is yours. Run the structural defense grid on why Michael's decay actually makes sense on your board.
You two are looking at it like a standard mechanical wear and tear report instead of a psychological ecosystem. Shane, you call it a failure of continuity, but from a clinical standpoint, Michael's physical decay in Ends is the most honest, brilliant choice the filmmakers could have made. Think about the foundational thesis statement from Halloween Kills. The more he kills, the more he transcends. But it's not because he has magic spellbook or an immortal engine inside him. It's because he feeds on the community's collective terror. He is a psychological parasite. In 2018 in Kills, the entire town of Haddonfield was completely hyper-fixated on him, pumping pure, unadulterated fear and adrenaline directly into his mythos. A mob was literally chanting his name in the streets. Of course he felt invincible. They were building his skyscraper for him with their own panic. But what happens after that night? Michael vanishes into the sewer grid, and Haddonfield changes its coping mechanism. The town doesn't hunt him anymore. They turn inward. They start eating each other alive, which is exactly how we get the tragic accident with Corey Cunningham. Without the town's collective spotlight feeding his legend, Michael starves. He's an old man who has been living in a wet concrete pipe for 4 years, with unmedicated gunshot wounds and a missing finger. He should be weak. He is a fading memory of an old trauma that the town has slowly replaced with new domestic rot. When Corey steps into that cave, he isn't just tackling a week-old man. He's a fresh, angry battery stepping into a dying circuit. It proves that the shape isn't just James Jude Courtney's physical body. It's a contagious, corrupting force. To me, watching a weakened Michael desperately cling to the last shreds of his mask while trying to mentor a new vessel is 1,000 times more fascinating and deeply unsettling than watching an invincible video game boss smash through another drywall partition.
A dying circuit? Chloe, I don't want a battery metaphor. I want a guy who can lift a car. If I wanted to watch a depressing documentary about an old man losing his lease on a cave, I'd watch the Discovery Channel.
Hold on, Marcus. Let's look at the layout here. Chloe, your parasitic thesis actually patches a lot of the logic leaks in the script. It makes ends a thematic mirror to the 1978 original. Evil is an infection that mutates when you look away from it. But from a narrative design perspective, it still leaves the final box office showdown feeling incredibly lopsided. When Laurie and Michael finally have their ultimate kitchen counter wrestling match, it doesn't feel like two titans colliding. It feels like a healthy, prepared survivalist taking down a guy who walked out of a hospice facility.
But that's the poetry of it, Shane. Laurie spent 40 years building a prison in her mind, and when she finally faces the actual monster, she realizes he's just a fragile, pathetic, mortal shell that can be broken by a standard kitchen table and an industrial refrigerator. She strips away the myth and leaves nothing but a corpse.
Yeah, well, speaking of breaking mortal shells, can we please get to the part where they drop that corpse into a literal industrial car shredder? Because that is the exact moment this trilogy redeemed itself for me.
Oh, the processing plant finale. Marcus, step up to the table. Give us your visceral damage report on the ultimate decommissioning of Michael Myers.
Oh, you know I've been waiting for this. Grab your ear protection, folks, because we are stepping into the heavy salvage yard for the ultimate decommissioning report. If you're over at ghostfacehorror.com tracking our historical splatter engineering metrics, the final 10 minutes of Halloween Ends holds the absolute record for maximum physical material destruction. We are throwing away the old coffin blueprint. David Gordon Green looked at 40 years of Michael Myers magically waking up in ambulances or crawling out of mine shafts, and he said, "We are going to dismantle this asset so thoroughly that there isn't enough tissue left to populate a single cell of a sequel." After Laurie and Allison finally pin Michael to the kitchen island and slice his carotid artery, which visually was a beautifully clean clinical bleed-out, the movie doesn't just roll the credits. The writers realized that if they left that body intact, the audience wouldn't believe the layout was truly finished. So, what does the town do? They don't trust a standard cemetery plot. They form a massive, slow-moving vehicular procession, mirroring the angry mob from Kills. But this time it isn't chaotic hysteria. It's an organized municipal cleanup. They march his corpse straight into the local scrapyard. The kinetic geometry of this final gag is absolutely flawless practical execution. The load-bearing leverage. They hoist Michael's massive body up onto the conveyor belt of a heavy-duty industrial automobile shredder. James Jude Courtney plays the corpse completely dead weight, emphasizing the total absence of that terrifying hydraulic power he had in 2018. The material crunch. As the conveyor drops him into the interlocking steel gears, the sound design switches from a cinematic musical score to a dry, low-frequency metallic crunch. The camera doesn't blink, Chloe. It stays locked right on the intake feed. You watch the fabric of the coveralls, the latex of the rotted mask, and the actual physical mass of the boogeyman get fed into a machine designed to turn 2-ton sedans into pocket-sized cubes of scrap metal. It is the ultimate visceral validation because a car shredder operates on pure, unyielding physics. You can't be supernatural against thousands of foot-pounds of mechanical torque. The gears don't care about your cosmic mythos, they just process material. Seeing him turned into a literal soup of red pulp and iron filings was the most satisfying, permanent closure this franchise has ever given us. It was a beautiful piece of industrial demolition work.
From a structural design perspective, Marcus, that car shredder is a total masterstroke. It's the ultimate architectural delete key. You aren't just burying the monster, you are literally rendering the physical asset down to 0 cubic centimeters.
And psychologically, it's exactly what the community needed. They needed a collective, public ritual of destruction to officially purge the infection from Haddonfield's municipal consciousness. They didn't just destroy a body, they ground up their own 40-year nightmare so they could finally breathe.
See, I told you, industrial machinery solves everything. You two can argue about the metaphors, but a car shredder is the ultimate therapeutic resolution.
All right, before Marcus tries to lease an industrial crusher for the studio, let's step back from the scrapyard. The modern Blumhouse blueprints are fully audited, the processing ledger is stamped, and the entire 48-year history of Michael Myers has been thoroughly dissected on the slab. Before we completely pull the master fuses on this entire franchise audit, we've got one final piece of business to stream out to the dark. You know we can't leave the garage without setting the atmosphere for the drive home. Over at ghostfacehorror.com, our automated late-night broadcast is officially locked into the deep cut archives. This final track is dedicated to the entire 48-year blueprint we just dissected. From the quiet, clean suburban streets of 1978, through the gritty, rust-covered demolition zones of the remakes, right up to the modern, reinforced concrete bunkers of the Blumhouse era.
Oh, now this is how you prime an engine for a late-night drive down a dark Georgia highway. Turn the subwoofers all the way up until the rearview mirrors start shaking off the windshield.
It's the ultimate audio exit file, a dark, modern auditory infection to keep you company in the dark long after the table goes cold.
The breakers are flipping in 3, 2, 1. Stay safe out there in the dark, Haddonfield. Hit the track.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every trail you leave, every sob you hear, I'll be stalking you every single day, every prayer you say, every lock you break, every step you take. I'll be haunting you. Oh, can't you I'll be watching you.
Yeah, now that is how you clear out the garage. If your speakers aren't smoking after that one, you're doing it wrong. But hold up, before you completely shut off your ignition and step out into the dark, I need to officially lock down the perimeter. Shane and Chloe already packed up their notebooks and cleared out, which means I get the final, unfiltered word tonight. You've been hanging out with us for this massive, multi-part franchise autopsy, but this is just one corner of the layout table. If you want to keep your dashboard shaking and your horror metric sheets fully updated, you need to head straight over to ghostfacehorror.com right now. We are the ultimate independent high-velocity digital hub for everything that bumps in the night, and we don't do superficial studio fluff. Let me lay out the complete asset sheet of what we're running over there 24/7. Forensic film analyses and audits. Just like the breakdown you heard tonight, our writing deck runs deep dive technical autopsies on slasher cinema, psychological thrillers, and indie genre gems. We look at the architectural sightlines, the camera geometry, and the actual narrative load-bearing integrity of your favorite movies. The master kill sheets. If you love the visceral damage reports, our custom-built horror ledgers track every single piece of practical FX carnage across the history of cinema. We break down the physics, the splatter mechanics, and the numerical data of the genre's greatest apex predators. Independent horror journalism and news. No corporate press releases here. We cover the underground scene, tracking upcoming indie releases, physical media drop dates, retro apparel trends, and exclusive interviews with the cast and crew veterans who actually pour the blood on set. Interactive survival widgets. Think you've got a better survival perimeter than Laurie Strode? Step up to our interactive slasher survival calculator on the site. You plug in your defensive stats, your tactical location, and your panic threshold, and our custom layout calculates your exact mathematical odds of making it to the end credits. Ghostface Horror Internet Radio Stream. Powered directly by our AzuraCast radio hosting, our automated stream never goes cold. When the text audits stop, the audio takeover begins. We are spinning 24/7 late-night tracks, eerie ambient soundscapes, horror-themed industrial beats, and exclusive reimagined cover songs from Studio 3117, The Kill Sheet, and Buzzsaw Dubman. It is a complete, reinforced fortress of genre content, and the gates are wide open. Make sure you bookmark ghostfacehorror.com, subscribe to the Scare Table podcast feed on whatever platform you're currently using to shake your rearview mirrors, and never leave your back door unlocked. The studio is officially out of gas. The automated radio stream is taking the wheel, and I am stepping out into the dark. Keep it heavy, keep it loud, and keep your eyes on the shadows. Peace.
The Scare Table. Let the haunting begin.
The Scare Table is proudly brought to you by GhostfaceHorror.com, where independent horror journalism meets hardcore forensic genre analysis. Turn the volume up, lock the front gates, and head over to GhostfaceHorror.com to explore the complete blueprint of terror. The slab is waiting.